hostage release deal with Israel, probably for multiple reasons. He had wanted to see on October the 7th or on October the 8th the Iranian axis of resistance rise up against Israel. That didn't really happen. I know Hezbollah started firing rockets into Israel on October the 8th, but the massive resistance against Israel that Sinwar had been hoping for just didn't materialize. However, the invasion of Lebanon by Israeli forces just over 2 weeks ago, bringing that front into a sort of a full-blown conflict, will, I'm sure, have encouraged Sinwar's position to hold firm on ceasefire negotiations from his point of view, in the hope that Israel would be dragged into a long and bloody conflict with Hamas's allies, Hezbollah, and it would further degrade Israel's capability to operate within Gaza. And so many people blame Yahya Sinwar for being the sticking point, but for being the reason why there are 101 hostages still in Gaza and there's been no hostage deal. So whether or not his elimination, if it does turn out to be confirmed, whether or not that will see some acceleration in the hostage deal is really hard to say, because I don't know who then the negotiators would speak to on the ground in Gaza. I think it is perhaps significant that they're saying that no hostages were found in the area. Again, there was an assumption that Sinwar would probably be using some of the remaining live hostages to provide sort of a human shield for him, in order that the Israelis would be reluctant to carry out an airstrike against him in case they were to kill hostages in the process. So I think there's some significance that no hostages were found around him. But as I say, what were rumours on social media only half an hour ago seem to have been substantiated somewhat by this official statement put out by the Israeli military and security services.
Ali, let me just give you a moment to check with your sources as well, because I want to bring viewers the latest post on X from the Israel Defense Forces on exactly this topic. I'm going to read it out in full, Ali. Look, it says, during IDF operations in Gaza, 3 terrorists were eliminated. The IDF and ISA are checking the possibility that one of the terrorists was Yahya Sinwar. At this stage, the identity of the terrorists cannot be confirmed. In the building where the terrorists were eliminated, there were no signs of the presence of hostages in the area. The forces that are operating the area will continue to operate with the required caution. I think that's reiterating the statement that you had brought us a short time ago, Ali, just letting us know that the IDF are investigating that possibility. It's difficult to pass some of these things, isn't it, sometimes, Ali? But you know the area well, and you know the people behind some of these statements. When it says there, in the building where they were eliminated, there were no signs of the presence of hostages, does that give us any more insight into what kind of operation this may well have been? And are we entirely clear exactly whereabouts this operation that killed these 3, may have included Sinwar, took place?
I don't know for sure. There are some rumours that the operation might have been in southern Gaza, around the Rafah area, but I would caution, I don't know that to be absolutely certain. So that is just something I'd heard on the side. But again, like a lot of what is coming out now, that is unconfirmed. So we'll wait for further confirmation. Now, the Israelis, I suspect, if it is Sinwar, will be able to do some pretty rapid forensic testing on him. Sinwar was held in Israeli jails for a long time because of his involvement with Hamas and attacks on Israeli forces and civilians. He was released as part of a major hostage deal with the swap with Gilad Shalit, the Israeli soldier, some years back. And Sinwar was amongst more than 1,000 Palestinian prisoners released. He went back into Gaza. He was born in Gaza. He went back into Gaza, and he rose through the ranks of Hamas to become ultimately its leader. And so I'm guessing here, but given that he was previously in Israeli detention for many years, I suspect they probably have some form of DNA that they could try and match, and I think they will be pretty keen to try and establish the facts behind this and announce it if it does turn out to be true. Sinwar had learned during his time in prison, he had learned Hebrew fluently. He was an excellent speaker of Hebrew, and he did it to try and get into the minds of his enemy, the Israelis, and to understand them better. And we've heard reports from some of the hostages who have been released over recent months who did see Sinwar, or Sinwar visited them when he was keeping them hostage in Gaza, and they report that he would speak to them in Hebrew. So he was someone who spent years trying to understand the psyche behind Israel and Israelis, understand the Jewish faith better in order to ultimately try and eliminate the presence of Israel in the Middle East. And that is what October the 7th led up to, a massive attack on Israel that was masterminded by him and Mohammed Daif, who was the military commander of Hamas.
Absolutely. And he was, as you say, Ali, released in 2011 in exchange for Gilad Shalit, one of 1,000 prisoners released at that time. He'd been serving 22 years for the abduction of and killing of 2 Israeli soldiers back then, but of course released, went on to then lead the military wing of Hamas, and then, as we understand, masterminded the October the 7th attacks. Now, if it is confirmed that Yahya Sinwar has been killed in this operation, as you say, the military element, the military leader will have been killed, the political leader, Ismail Haniyeh, who was over in Doha, killed in Tehran, as you pointed out, and Mohammed Daif. They are the 3 leaders before this war. Whenever you read about Hamas, who were the 3 figureheads of this, how much is this an organisation that has these figureheads that then doesn't have those coming up to replace it? Is it a hydra? Is that sort of the sense of an organisation like Hamas, that there are always others to replace the leadership?
Well, I mean, as a rule, yes. But I think we should view what has happened in Gaza and to Hamas over the last 12 and a bit months slightly differently. You know, Gaza is a place that has been, in parts, totally flattened. I've seen it for myself, totally flattened. A place like Rafah and Khan Yunis, the Israeli military occupy much of Gaza. They've carried out heavy airstrikes. There's been heavy fighting on the ground, and so I would wonder, you know, to what extent Hamas would be able to find a new leader after 12 and a half months of it being fought very heavily by the IDF, and the IDF have successfully taken out so many of its command. It's hard to think who would be possible to replace Yahya Sinwar, possibly his brother Mohammed, who I think would be the only one I could think of who was still left in that kind of upper echelon. But I mean, he didn't have the reputation, or doesn't have the reputation of his brother, certainly within Hamas itself. And you know, don't forget, if this was Sinwar who was killed, there was 2 others, according to the Israeli statement, found with him. So, you know, who are they? Are they some senior officials who he was with? I guess that is also an open question that we wait to find answers for. But I think it'll be very hard for Hamas to find a new leader of any substance, or who will be effective in Gaza. I mean, Hamas is an organisation that stretches beyond Gaza. Hamas has got and has had a growing presence in the West Bank, particularly after October the 7th. It has a significant presence in Lebanon as well, and it has a political presence elsewhere in the Middle East, headquartered really in Doha in Qatar. So there will be people, and if Hamas wants to remain alive as an organisation, which they will want to, there will be people who can assume that position of head of Hamas. We saw their ability to do that reasonably quickly after the killing of Ismail Haniyeh, but I'm not sure they could put anyone in place who would be able to bring the organisation back together, certainly in Gaza, in a way that can continue to resist the Israeli operations in Gaza.
Yeah. Well, as we say, Ali, the IDF are checking on the possibility that Yahya Sinwar has been killed in this strike. It's still, at this stage, unconfirmed exactly where this strike took place. 3 people killed in an attack by the IDF. They have posted onto social media in the past few minutes confirming that they are investigating what has happened here. Let's just show you that tweet that was put onto X by the IDF in the last half an hour or so. I'll read it out in full. What has been said: during IDF operations in Gaza, 3 terrorists were eliminated. The IDF and ISA are checking the possibility that one of the terrorists was Yahya Sinwar. At this stage, the identity of the terrorists cannot be confirmed. It goes on. In the building where the terrorists were eliminated, there was no signs of the presence of hostages in the area. The forces that are operating in the area are continuing to operate with the required caution. Now, it's worth trying to pass what we're being told in this particular statement from the IDF and ISA to try and ascertain any more detail from it. I mean, it would seem that this operation is separate. Ali, would you say that's fair from sort of the air war, the airstrikes that are ongoing? It seems as if it's a building where terrorists were eliminated, suggesting that this may well, because the forces are continuing to operate in the area, may have been a ground operation that had taken place, which had allowed for the Israeli military to go in after these 3 terrorists, as they say, and are now trying to investigate whether or not one of those terrorists is Yahya Sinwar. And of course, this comes at a moment for the war in Gaza and, of course, the expanding war into Lebanon, where many of Israel's allies and partners are hoping that there will be a de-escalation in tension, not least because of the violence that's ensuing and the threat of a wider war, but of course because of the grave humanitarian situation that is unfolding in Gaza, has been unfolding in Gaza for the past recent months. Reported yesterday by the UN that no aid had managed to get into the north of Gaza, where a de facto siege has been held for the first couple of weeks of October. We have had that letter from the US imploring the Israelis to allow more aid into the north of Gaza, and there's been what is thought of as a very unusual ultimatum put in place by the US, saying that if that aid is not allowed in, that military aid, in part, could be cut off. So at this stage in the war, with one of the war aims of the Israelis being to destroy Hamas and make sure that it is not able to function as a force within Gaza, the news of the possibility that the military leader Yahya Sinwar has been killed will come as potentially some relief and could see us moving towards a point where the conflict in that region starts to de-escalate.
Well, I think it could be a transformative moment, the killing of Yahya Sinwar, if it turns out to be true. My instinct is that the Israeli military would not have put out a statement like it has done if it at least didn't believe that this is a pretty high possibility. And I mean, if you look at the pictures on social media purporting to be Sinwar's body, I mean, there are some characteristics that would be common to what we know of him. I mean, he was not a person in recent months who anybody had really seen. I think there was only one image of him since October the 7th, which is pretty much the back of his head walking through a tunnel under Gaza with some members of his family wearing flip-flops, I think, and that is the only image we've seen of him. But there are some marked characteristics like his ears and his teeth that might be matched up pretty quickly, and I just don't think that if there wasn't even the slightest possibility that this was him, I just don't think the Israeli military would have put out a statement like they did. But as I say, we'll have to await official confirmation of that. I wouldn't be surprised if it came from Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, such a major moment it would be. It is hard to know what it means for the hostages in Gaza. Whilst Sinwar was, we are told, the person who was standing firm against a hostage deal and blocking a hostage deal, at the same time he was the person who mediators were able to talk to and to, up to an extent at least, negotiate with. And so I'm not quite sure how he would be replaced in that way. Who would they now talk to and negotiate with? We'll have to wait and see. And what it does for Hamas as a fighting force, which is severely degraded anyway, but still remains. I mean, every day there are battles between Israeli military and Hamas in Gaza. Hamas has shown that it has some residual capability to fire missiles into Israel. Still, it has done so on a couple of occasions over the last couple of weeks. So Hamas is not defeated by any means, but the killing of their leader, Yahya Sinwar, along with the killing of so many senior commanders over recent months, could be a major moment in this, and it could be a time where talks for a ceasefire are revisited. So this could be hugely consequential.
And Ali, look, is it still unclear at this stage exactly what has happened to Yahya Sinwar? But I tend to agree with you. I think you're right that the Israelis would not have gone to the lengths of putting out a statement, even suggesting that he had been killed, had they not had some kind of sense that it may well have happened at this point. And as you say, he was held in Israeli jails for many, many years. So they will have ways of identifying this man if it does transpire that this is the person that they have killed in this operation. Now, the leadership of Hamas has been degraded, as you say, as a fighting force. It's been degraded. You have been, journalists can't get into Gaza, but every now and again they do get the opportunity to get inside the Gaza Strip. And I know that, as you said, you have been in recently. Can you give us a sense of what it's like as a place right now? It's important to sort of understand just how much destruction there is there and how life could even continue going forward. We're looking at live pictures. I think that is southern Gaza at the moment. You can see the tent encampments there and buildings in the background. As to how, Ali, how life can go forward in a place like that. And I wonder, in a vacuum, what comes next and whether or not the long-awaited day after moment can now start to really be thought about. There was a sense in reporting it in many areas that prior to October the 7th, there was a moment where there was a chance for some kind of grand deal, some kind of normalization of relations with Israel and Saudi Arabia. And the Saudis have often been talked about as being perhaps responsible, Saudis and other Gulf states, as to helping rebuild Gaza post-war. And I wonder whether at this point now, it's obviously way too early to get to anything conclusive, but whether there can now start to be the beginning of the thought about what could come after all of this.
I think it's probably still, well, from an Israeli government point of view, probably still too early for that. The Israelis, Benjamin Netanyahu set some two major objectives at the start of the war in Gaza. One was the elimination of Hamas, or total victory over Hamas. Now, that was always going to be unrealistic. The idea that you could remove Hamas from Gaza and any trace of it was always going to be unrealistic, as history, even recent history, teaches us when it comes to movements and ideologies like Hamas. But that language has slightly changed from the Israelis over months, and it's they need to destroy Hamas's military capability. That has been their objective more recently. Now, if you've killed Yahya Sinwar, I would say that Israel would be pretty close to then sort of being able to declare a victory, for that objective. But their other objective is to free all of the hostages, and there are still 101 remaining in Gaza, 97 of them taken on October the 7th, and then 4 more who were taken hostage in years before that. And so that will remain an outstanding objective, and until that is complete, I can't see a scenario whereby Israeli forces withdraw from Gaza, and I can't see a scenario where the fighting ends completely. And the other problem is that at the moment, such is the way the war is being fought in Gaza, and such is the lack of any kind of plan for what comes next, there really is a reluctance amongst states in the Middle East to get involved in any way. So if we were, the question of who's going to rebuild Gaza and who's going to finance the rebuilding of Gaza, well, I think probably the most likely answer to that is some of the Gulf states, perhaps the UAE, perhaps Saudi Arabia, and others. But they are just not going to get involved at this stage because there is still an ongoing war there. There is still an ongoing Israeli occupation there. There is no plan for who amongst Palestinian society would govern Gaza. There is no plan for any kind of greater Palestinian autonomy in the West Bank, for example. And all of these are factors that are putting the likes of Saudi Arabia and the UAE off getting involved. They do not want to be seen to their own people or to the Palestinians as sort of just coming in immediately after the Israelis have left, because that just wouldn't go down well. So I just think it's too early probably to assume that we're getting to a stage where you might have a ceasefire and then the rebuilding of Gaza. But having said that, and you asked me my personal experiences of being in Gaza, having seen some of Rafah and Khan Yunis on various different trips, which have been totally flattened. Much of them have been, and I mean flattened, it's rubble for the most part. The buildings are unlivable. It is hard to see how much longer people can continue living in conditions like that. And, we have seen that sort of come to a bit of a breaking point this week with the US ultimatum, with the suggestions from the British government that they are looking at sanctions against some of the far-right ministers in Netanyahu's coalition. But as for the prospects of people coming in to donate money and to help rebuild Gaza, I don't think that's something that's going to happen in the short term.
Right. All right. Look, Ali, I'll give you a moment to check with your sources and see what else you can find out. Thanks, Alice de Bunkel, there, our Middle East correspondent. Just as we're continuing our coverage of the announcement from the IDF that they are investigating the possibility that the military leader of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, the mastermind of the October 7th attack, has been killed in an operation in which 2 other people were also killed. So let's just take you through who Sinwar is. Well, the 61-year-old has led Hamas since 2017. He joined the group in the early 1980s. He spent more than 20 years in an Israeli prison for killing both Israelis and Palestinians suspected of collaborating with Israel. He was then released in 2011 as part of a swap deal. More than 1,000 prisoners, Palestinian prisoners, released for one Israeli soldier who was being held hostage, Gilad Shalit. Now, Sinwar is believed to be the architect, the mastermind behind the October 7th attacks, and is Israel's most wanted. All right, let's speak now to Samuel Romani, Associate Fellow from the Royal United Services Institute. Samuel, it's great to have you this afternoon to get your expertise on this sort of thing. I mean, first of all, just your reaction to what we know so far. That statement from the IDF-ISA is saying they are investigating whether or not Sinwar has been killed.
Yeah, we obviously don't know that Sinwar has been killed. There's a building that was targeted, and the IDF is claiming that there were 3 terrorists who were eliminated in their operations in Gaza. But they also said that the operation did not occur in an area where hostages were. And there were persistent reports over the past couple of weeks, including from the Qatari mediators who were in touch with Sinwar, that Sinwar was hiding amongst the hostages. So there's some doubt about that, but there are photos of Sinwar's alleged dead body and other reports that suggest it could have happened, but we can't confirm it yet.
And at this point, as we are awaiting confirmation, just give us a sense, Samuel, of what a change this could bring to the fighting in Gaza if it is confirmed that Sinwar is killed. From the Israeli point of view, is that a war aim achieved?
Well, it's a massive step towards mission accomplished for Israel in terms of cracking down on the main architects of the October 7th attack. They have already got rid of course, the Mohammed Deif. Now they've got Sinwar, and they've also got the political leader, Haniyeh, who, according to some of the New York Times documents, even if he was not involved in the planning of it, was certainly informed of the idea of a large-scale terrorist attack in advance. So with the death of all three of these people, Israel would be able to have played a major role in achieving its goals, but Hamas as an organization will not die.
Well, talk to us about Hamas as an organisation. As I put it, Ali, just a short while ago, is it an organisation that's like a Hydra? Will these individuals be replaced? I mean, bearing in mind, of course, that Sinwar and Hania Ndif have been leaders for years, for decades. They have built up that power base within them, within the organisation. Where does it go next?
Well, I mean, obviously, the Hamas leadership has suffered blows before, and they've recovered from them. I mean, the most notable one was obviously Sheikh Yassin, who was the architect and the founder of Hamas, the imam who founded it in 1987, who was assassinated in 2004. You also saw the death of Abdelaziz al-Raisi also in 2004. So two major leaders dying around the same time, and Hamas being able to rebuild itself. So it's possible if they could do that once, they could do it again. And Sinwar Deef and Hania's loss will be rebuilt as an organization. And it's also important to keep in mind that Hamas is not the only kind of organization sharing the same kind of ideology against Israel. There's also other groups like Islamic Jihad, which might be able to capitalize and gain momentum with all this disruption happening in Hamas. So the movement that has created Hamas is certainly not going to die, and Hamas itself will probably continue to survive.
Well, it takes me on to my next question then, doesn't it? If Hamas has been degraded and broken down in some ways as an organisation, who then steps into whatever vacuum there is in Gaza? I know that as we're talking with Ali there is some hope, expectation. There could be some who would come in and help rebuild Gaza after this. But I guess what you're suggesting is that Hamas as the organisation and as the idea as well will not be killed by the death of the leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that we need to see what happens from here. Obviously, Hamas is narrowed to parts of southern Gaza. In August and September, the Israelis were fairly confident that they were even in the 11% safe zone strip and its surrounding. They were breaking down the large Hamas brigades into smaller units, and that they had killed a large number of Hamas's rank and file. So the Israelis will see this as another step towards victory in Gaza, which might lead them to consolidate and redirect their efforts over to Lebanon. But what comes next is an open question. Is it Israel placing the territory under conservatorship for some time? Is it the Israelis passing the authority on to the Palestinian Authority and getting other Arab countries involved in rebuilding, like Saudi Arabia? I mean, those are probably the most likely options. But Hamas and PIJ and other groups will remain threats to Israel and insurgents, and the ideas that they inspire will not die, and they could even be energized by cooperation between the Palestinian Authority and the Israelis in a post-war scenario, and cooperation with the Saudis and the Israelis in a post-war scenario too.
Well, explain that to us, how Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas could, in fact, be energised by what's happened here and that sort of push, desire by some parties to try and rebuild Gaza.
Well, yes. I mean, Hamas was obviously energized in the Intifadas in the context of the terror organization by the very active Yasser Arafat, of course, from the PLO, engaging with Yitzhak Rabin and sort of accepting Israel. And we've also seen the Saudi-Israeli normalization talks being one of the catalysts for the October 7th attacks in the first place. So we have a lot of history of basically any kind of engagement by Arab countries with Israel or by Palestinian organizations with the Israelis on peace or on rebuilding or on anything of that nature, leading to galvanizing the more extremist elements who do not want peace, like Hamas and PIJ. So I think that kind of cooperation will enable them as well. And Iran has been sponsoring PIJ quite consistently since 2014. So they're an organization which is quite large. It had 8,000 fighters at the time of the 2014 war. We don't know how many they have right now, but it's still not a large, not a unit that can easily disappear.
Samuel, do we have any insight into Hamas's popularity among Palestinians at this point? And I understand that in the West Bank, it's sort of gained popularity over recent months. I mean, in Gaza, it's probably very difficult to tell. But what's your sense of how it is seen as an organisation by ordinary Palestinians at the moment?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, obviously, Hamas has only had one election in 2006. They run a very repressive authoritarian structure inside Gaza before the October 7th war. So it's really kind of hard to tell. it does appear as if the Hamas leadership is more popular than Mahmoud Abbas or Fatah across the two Palestinian territories, according to some polls that were taken in March. One poll at that time showed that only about 7% of Gazans blamed Hamas for the humanitarian crisis they were facing, for their food shortages, and for their problems. Hamas was very effective at redirecting their energy towards Israel. There was another set of polls that were done in June that also showed high levels of popularity for Hamas. But since the late summer, early fall, I've been seeing surveys that suggest that there is actually a bit of a dip. So I think they're more popular than Mahmoud Abbas across the Palestinian territories. There are many people who don't blame Hamas and blame Israel for all their problems. But there's also a subsection who are getting frustrated by this perpetual war, particularly when it seemed as if a ceasefire in exchange for hostage releases was within reach, and they obstructed that.
Samuel, give us your insight onto the hostages. As Ali was saying, Sinwar was seen as the main negotiating point and also a blockage in trying to come about a hostage deal coming about. If he is confirmed as dead, who are the Israelis and the mediators to negotiate with to get those hostages out?
Well, this really creates a complication for the mediation process. I mean, obviously, the Qataris were strongly hopeful that Haniyeh was going to live and survive and be the person to deal with, because he's a political figure who has a history of carrying out back-channel negotiations with the Israelis on aid supplies, with the United Nations on aid supplies, as well as dealing with the hostage issue. His death was a major blow, and there was not much optimism, I think, from my sources in Qatar, as well as from my sources elsewhere in the region, that Sinwar was going to really be a big grand bargain deal maker. There was a lot more concern, I think, that Sinwar was going to use the hostages as human shields for himself, or kind of create a situation that could be adverse for them. So I don't think the Israelis are going to see this as a massive obstacle to diplomacy, given the fact that they didn't see engaging with Sinwar as something that was viable to begin with. But of course, having nobody to talk to is a very bad scenario also. So even having somebody as bad as Sinwar may be a lesser evil to that.
And all the while, those hostages, of course, remain in captivity. Now, in terms of the war aims of the Israelis and what they will want to do in the coming weeks and months, I mean, is it likely that even if this person is killed, that the fighting continues? Because the sense you're giving us, Samuel, in the sense that many people will recognise, is that the situation in Gaza, unless resolved and taken back perhaps to some of those what now seem like dreamy days of two-state solution, is going to be, I think you used the word perpetual war, is that sense, isn't it? So, I mean, sort of where does this go from here? Is the only possibility to try and bring about complete stopping to the fighting, Israeli occupation, which of course will not be accepted by anyone in the Palestinian occupied territories?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's obviously the question. I mean, I think that this war is definitely going to continue and perpetuate. I mean, just because Osama bin Laden and Baghdadi died, and Al-Qaeda didn't mean the war against Al-Qaeda and ISIS and the war on terror stopped. Just because Hassan Nasrallah is dead doesn't mean the Israelis are giving up on continuing their attacks on Hezbollah and Iranian proxies across the region. So decapitating key individuals is only one facet, however symbolically resonant it is, of the broader war against Hamas and PIJ. And I think that this will continue. We've already seen an alleged Israeli attack on a school that killed 19 people happening around the same time as this. So there are continuing attacks on civilian targets. And yes, it's a very, very difficult situation to resolve. I don't think that there's going to be much progress in the near future towards a two-state solution or towards a resolution of the final status issues that created the outrage that fueled support for Hamas or PIJ anytime soon.
Yeah, and Samuel, look, as we know, and as Ali mentioned, it's nearly impossible for journalists, Western journalists, to get into Gaza to sort of see what it's like on the ground. But prior to this war, prior to October the 7th attacks, what was life like under the leadership of Hamas in Gaza for Palestinians? What sort of sense was there that people could live their lives under this organisation's rule?
Well, I mean, it was a very difficult life from a lot of respects, because obviously there were shortages of basic consumer goods and supplies because of the ongoing blockade of the Gaza Strip that began from 2007, shortly after the takeover by Hamas, as well as Hamas's victory in the election. So that Israeli blockade was complicated. Also, there were a lot of human rights abuses that were being carried out by Hamas. There were repeated reports from Amnesty International, for example, about extrajudicial killings against Palestinians involved with collaboration with Israel, allegedly, sometimes on very vague terms. So that was some of the stuff that Sinwar was jailed for many years ago, was still continuing. There were abductions, torture, repression of women, high levels of capital punishment use, really a lot of violence and dispersion and crackdowns on protests. So economic deprivation and authoritarian to borderline totalitarian practices at home. So it was not a pretty sight then, and it's certainly an even worse sight now.
Now, Samuel, as you've said, Hamas defeated Fatah in elections back in 2006, and that was the only election that's been held in the Gaza Strip, as I understand it. You can correct me if I'm wrong, since that moment. I mean, taking out the politics, what do you think the sense is from those that opposed Hamas, from Fatah, as to the organisation going forward, and could they be replaced as an administration in Gaza?
Well, the Fatah-Hamas conflict was an extremely bloody and brutal one between January of 2006 and May of 2007, which is the period that included the elections that were held. About 600 people were killed, so it was something that was quite violent. You did have a reconciliation agreement in 2011. You had the Doha agreement brokered by the Qataris in 2012, and a reconciliation deal in 2014. We have seen some inter-Palestinian dialogues involving different factions being hosted by countries like Russia and China over the past number of years. And as well as in Cairo, we saw the Hamas leadership and Fatah talk, where the Hamas leadership was basically calling for more drastic solutions to what Israel was doing in the West Bank. And then a few months later, we saw October 7th. So Hamas and Fatah can talk, they can coordinate, they can learn to probably cohabitate, but there's also severe mistrust and severe legacies of violence and bloodshed that makes both organizations see each other as fierce adversaries. So I think Fatah will probably be quite happy to see Hamas out of the way, but Hamas will want to stay relevant enough and existent enough so it can be a thorn in Fatah's side and steer Fatah away from more pragmatic cooperation with Israel and towards allowing for more militarism to fester in the Palestinian territories.
And in the West Bank, the Palestinian Authority there, of course, with leader President Mahmoud Abbas, many see as weak and ineffectual. What will happen with that organisation at this point, do you think, if it is confirmed that Sinwar has been killed?
Well, I think that the West Bank, obviously, Abbas has been facing a lot of criticisms for his allegations of corruption that have been aligned with him, as well as the generally deteriorating security situation, which includes many attacks coming from Israeli settlers. And it was widely believed before October 7th, of course, that if there was going to be a new reheating of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, it may well come from the West Bank zone. And that may have been part of the reason why the Israelis were a bit asleep at the wheel with the threat of a ground invasion coming from Gaza and the paratroopers and everything like that, because Netanyahu was so focused on the West Bank and the settler violence that was going on there, he was kind of ignoring what was happening inside Gaza. So West Bank has become more unstable and Abbas's situation has become more parlous ever since the war in Gaza has begun. And any move to defeat Sinwar or an Israeli occupation of Gaza will only lead to heightened violence between those settlers, some of whom are supportive or sympathetic to extremists like Ben Gvir and Smotrich, who the British are thinking of sanctioning, and Palestinians who are living there. But I think that there'll be more violence in the West Bank if this does lead to an Israeli occupation in Gaza, and there isn't a tangible movement towards durable reconstruction and Palestinian self-determination.
OK, look, Samuel Armani, really do appreciate your expertise and time this afternoon from the Royal United Services. And Samuel, it's always good to speak with you. Thank you for that. As we're continuing our coverage of this developing story, the breaking news that the Israelis are investigating the possibility that the mastermind of the October the 7th attacks, the military leader of Hamas in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, has been killed in an operation in Gaza in the last few hours. Let's bring in Professor Fawaz Gerges, Chair of Contemporary Middle Eastern Studies at the London School of Economics. Professor Gerges, great to have you with us. Thanks so much. Why don't we just start our conversation by talking about who Yahya Sinwar was?
Well, Yahya Sinwar is the defense minister of Hamas. He is now, or was, the de facto political leader of Hamas. Highly charismatic, highly popular, He was the architect of the 7th of October attack against Israel. Probably, I would say, he is one of the most popular Palestinian leaders, not just in Gaza, but also in the West Bank and occupied East Jerusalem and outside Palestine, occupied Palestinian territories. I think even the Palestinians who do not really agree with his ideology and tactics view him as an iconic figure, a figure who basically defended Palestinian dignities, a figure who stood up and basically took on the Israelis. He went on the offensive as opposed to being historically on the defensive. But yet we have to wait and see whether he is confirmed killed. As you know, this could be part of the Israeli intelligence operation to flesh him out. And it's not confirmed yet. But if Sinwar is confirmed dead, this would be a devastating blow for the military wing of Hamas.
And well, let's stay with that then on the military wing and the effectiveness of Hamas as an organisation after this year of war. As Ali was telling us, the fighting force of Hamas seems to have been severely degraded. And then if it's confirmed that Sinwar has been killed, that's another their top leader, military leader, killed, as well as the political leader, Ismail Haniyeh, and Mohammed Daif, who was killed as well not long ago. Is the organisation functioning at this point, Professor Gerges?
Yes, it's functioning and it's fighting back. Remember, Hamas is a paramilitary organization. It's not a conventional army. Hamas has already morphed into a guerrilla force. Hamas has already been planning for a long time, war of attrition. Hamas has made it very clear. And the Israelis say that Hamas has basically moved, transformed into a guerrilla force, and it's asymmetrical warfare. So even though Israel has successfully degraded Hamas military capabilities, Hamas will go on, will fight another day. And for your own viewers, this fight is not just about one person, iconic, charismatic, powerful as he was, Yahya Sinwar. This is really about an organization that deeply entrenched both in Gaza, the West Bank, and in the diaspora. And without a political vision, without an end to the Israeli military occupation, you're going to have multiple rounds. This is just another round. And keep in mind that Israel has been assassinating iconic Palestinian figures for 40, 50 years. Yet Hamas has been able to rebuild its ranks and file. I take it for now, in the short term and midterm, this will be really devastating. But at the end of the day, the guerrilla warfare against Israel, both in Gaza and the West Bank, will go on.
And that sense of perpetual war, then, Professor Gerges, is exactly why it's so difficult to see what comes in that sort of day after moment, if there is a day after moment, while there is occupation ongoing and while there is still that ideology within Gaza and within the West Bank. Can there ever be an end to the fighting?
I think this is really, you put your finger on the pulse of the dilemma. Israel can win multiple rounds of battles, but without really having a political horizon, without really ending Israel's military occupation of Palestinian lands, without granting Palestinians self-determination. And I'm not saying so as a professor at the London School of Economics. Our government here says so. The Americans say so. The international community says so. But Israel does not. I mean, there is not even a single, not even one single Israeli politician, both from the ruling coalition or the opposition, who basically utters the word Palestinian state. This tells you how difficult and how it's not really a perpetual war, it's a forever war. Because not just you have a war now in Gaza, the West Bank, but even in Lebanon. And now we could really witness all-out regional war between Israel and Iran. A footnote here. I think if Yahya Sinwar is confirmed dead, Netanyahu will play it very big. He will tell the Israelis, look, I have told you so. I won total victory. this could really embolden Benjamin Netanyahu and expand his war much further, not just to Lebanon, but also to Iran. This is where the risk of further monstrous miscalculation on the part of the Netanyahu-led coalition.
Professor Gerges, let me just interrogate that. So you think that if it is confirmed that Sinwar is killed and that is the military leader of Hamas dead in Gaza, that would not, you think, that could not be the end, possibly, of the ongoing conflict? That could be the moment of further expansion. Are you suggesting that there may well be further occupation of Gaza by the Israelis as a result of the destruction of Hamas?
Well, I don't say so. Listen to what the Benjamin Netanyahu-led government says. They will never, ever basically exit Gaza. Benjamin Netanyahu and his coalition and the military have made it very clear they will have a security zone between. I mean, Gaza has shrunk, as you know, and the Israelis will never leave the Philadelphia border between Israel and Palestine and Egypt. The reality is Israel wants a free hand, security hand in Gaza. And the killing of Sinwar, my argument is that the killing of the Sinwar, the assassination of Sinwar, if it's confirmed, this will basically really give Netanyahu more ideological ammunition to convince the Israeli public, look, he is winning, as he keeps saying. And that means that leave me finish this war, leave me have total victory over Hezbollah in Lebanon, and let me go, against the head of the snake. He calls Iran the head of the axis of evil, the axis of resistance. So my take on it, not only we're not going to witness the end of the catastrophe, humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, I think we might really see further escalation on the part of Netanyahu and his extremist religious Zionist coalition in the next few hours and next few days, for sure. I hope I am wrong, though.
And many will hope you're wrong as well, Professor Gerges. Look, this is a man who masterminded the October the 7th attacks that killed those 1,200 Israelis and has brought about this war at this moment in Gaza. And I know that the war has been ongoing for a long time, but I want to ask you whether or not people in the region who want to see peace for the Palestinians, neighbouring countries, the Gulf states, could the removal of Yahya Sinwar be good for that, if that were to be the moment that brings about some kind of settlement, some kind of peace?
Well, I mean, you're asking really multiple questions. Will the Gulf states or most of the Arab governments be happy? Yes. They don't really care for Hamas. They don't really care for the Sinwar. They blame the Sinwar, in particular, some Gulf leaders. But if you ask me about the people, there's a big difference between the rulers and the people. The people will grieve. Sinwar was very popular. He resonated because of his standing up, his defiance, of his offensive strategy against Israel. I mean, there is an argument to be made that Netanyahu now could go back to the Israeli public and say, we have won. We could really now accept a hostage deal. The question is, will Hamas accept a hostage deal without the end of the war? This is the question. Netanyahu wants a pause, a temporary pause, while Hamas wants the end of the war itself, period. But the Gulf states and the Arab state probably will likely be happy that Sinwar has been killed. But the people in the region, whether the Palestinians or Jordanians or Iraqis or Lebanese or Moroccan, I think many will grieve in as much, well, much more than they grieved for Hassan Nasrallah, the killing of Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah.
Right. And that is because, as you said, that Yahya Sinwar was popular, charismatic, and showed a level of willingness to do what many had thought unthinkable and attack Israel in the bloody, deadly way that he chose to do on the 7th of October.
Absolutely. I mean, remember historically, in the past, 50 years, Israel is always on the offensive, always. Israel always attacks, subjugate, dominate, kills, mow the grass. Its strategy is to mow the grass. This is really the first time ever in Palestine history where a Palestinian leader stood up and went on the offensive against one of the most powerful nations militarily in the Middle East and the world, armed to the teeth by the United States. So in a way, Yahya Sinwar really resonates deeply in the Palestinian and the Arab imagination as a leader who dared to do the impossible. to take on Israel. So in fact, what Israel really does not understand is that the assassination of Sinwar and the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, would turn them into iconic figures, martyrs. And that's why the assassination, the strategy of assassination, does not really, it brings basically some returns in the short term, but in the long term does not really address the underlying strategic predicament that Israel faces in Palestine and in the region now.
But how does that sit with his bloody past? You know, this was a man who was an enforcer, was jailed for killing not only Israelis but Palestinians as well, who were thought to be collaborating with the Israelis. A violent man who, as I say, masterminded that attack on Israel on the 7th of October. Despite all of that, if it is confirmed that he has been killed, you think that he will be viewed as a martyr and perhaps as a hero by many Palestinians and in the wider diaspora?
Well, I mean, look, for you and for Israel and the West, yeah, I mean, he is a violent man. He was a violent man because he killed many, I mean, he ordered the killing of many Israelis. For the Palestinians and for Arabs and Muslims and many people in the world, he is an anti-colonial leader. He was trying to free his people from Israeli subjugation. And they tell you that anti-colonial fights are bitter, are bloody, soaked in blood, drenched in blood. So really, we're talking about the clashes of narratives. So in the West and in Israel and the American view him as a violent man. For the Palestinians and Arabs and Muslims, they view him as a man who basically stood up, defends Palestinian dignity, defends Palestinians' really rights, and he's tried to expel the colonialists from Palestinian lands. And look, this question, what your question and my answer puts us in the same dilemma. Where do we go from here?
Yeah.
The reality is the only way to go out of here is what? For the two people. For the Israel and the Palestinians to reconcile. And reconciliation must require the end of Israeli occupation, the granting Palestinian, self-determination, and the two people living in peace side by side. That's what we hope, and that's what we pray for.
100%. Professor Gurj, let's just continue on that theme then, because, of course, Hamas as an organisation, when first set up, wanted the destruction of Israel. I know that there were statements put out as part of its doctrine that slightly softened that language, but that was still the ambition, was it not, of Yahya Sinwar, that Israel would not exist as the neighbour to the Palestinians?
Well, look, I mean, this is the ideal type. I mean, this is you might say, the Divergent type, the manifesto. But Hamas has already accepted the two implicitly and indirectly. Palestinian leaders have been on record saying they would accept a Palestinian state based on the 1967 borders. In fact, the question is not whether Hamas has really still accepted a two-state solution. Has any Israeli politician ever accepted a Palestinian state? We never asked this question. I mean, it's unfair for the Palestinians and even for Hamas, regardless of what we think. Hamas is not my cup of tea. That's not the question. But is there a single Israeli leader who accepts a Palestinian state? The Palestinian, as you know, the Palestinian Authority, the Palestinian National Movement has already accepted Israel, part of the Camp David Peace Accord. At the end of the day, we can go on and on and on. We need genuine reconciliation between Israel and the Palestinians, an end to Israel's military occupation, and for Israel to be integrated, really genuine integrated in its environment. This requires Israel being a good citizen and ending its military occupation of Palestinian lands. And then you'll see Palestinians not really betting on Hamas. You'll see Palestinians saying they would like a different vision, a different kind of government, not a government led by the Hamas leadership.
And Professor Gurj, you've given us the direction where the Israelis take this as an opportunity to do more. What about giving us a sense of the direction where it could go in a different direction, where, as we heard at the United Nations yesterday, Israel is very quickly becoming an international pariah. Its staunch ally has given it an ultimatum to make sure it does more to provide aid to the people of Gaza. The UK has demanded that as well. We heard that just in the Security Council yesterday. If, as the possibility of Yahya Sinwar being killed continues to be out there. Is this now an opportunity for those that want to see that two-state solution, the only thing that can bring peace to the region? Is this an opportunity for diplomacy and work to try and bring that about at this point?
Well, I mean, the question is, Israel does not listen to anyone except one audience, and that's the United States of America. You know, and I know, that Israel does not really listen to the UK or to France or to the United Nations. And that's why without American leadership using leverage against Israel, nothing will happen. And so far, we have really seen that the American leadership, it doesn't matter whether it's Barack Obama or whether it's Donald Trump or whether it's Biden. They're unwilling or unable to use leverage in order to really convince, nudge, pressure Israel to accept a Palestinian state. So the question we're back to square one. How do we convince an Israeli government that does not believe, does not want, object, reject a Palestinian state without American leadership, without American leverage? And I'm afraid to say, regardless of who wins the elections in November in the United States, I don't think we're going to see a different kind of radical American strategy that basically pressures Israel in order to end its military occupation. And that's why I'm sad to say that, truly, with a sad heart, I don't see a light at the end of the tunnel in the next 5 or 10 years.
It's an intractable situation, isn't it, Professor? Look, you'll know that this Netanyahu government, it wasn't very popular prior to the war breaking out. It's gained some popularity, amazingly, as the war has been ongoing for this past 12 months. But you'll know that many people in Israel just want this all to be over, want to live in peace in the region, and want those hostages returned. What about internal pressure, do you think, from that side of politics within Israel that could, if this is confirmed that Sinwar is dead and Prime Minister Netanyahu announces that and says that the war there, in that respect, is over, could that pressure tell in any way?
Well, actually, the reverse is going to happen. You're going to see Netanyahu's popularity skyrocketing in the next few days, because Netanyahu now is going to go back to the Israeli public and said, I promise you total victory. That's killing the top Hamas leader who masterminded the 7th of October attack. This is exactly what we're going to see. And the polls of Israel, as you said, suggest that Netanyahu has gained popularity. In any new election, Netanyahu and his extremist Zionist religion coalition will gain probably a majority. And that's why, at the end of the day, internal pressure is very well, but a majority of Israeli public support the extremist elements. The Israeli public has really shifted more and more to the right. Even the center has shifted to the right. That's why Benjamin Netanyahu is seen as a centrist conservative. I mean, imagine Benjamin Netanyahu as a centrist. So on his far right, you have really extremist Zionist coalition who do not really believe in peace. They want to, in fact, they want to nationalize, they want to occupy, they want, including Gaza and the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Again, internal pressure is important, but I would argue that American and British pressure, consistent, real, important, real pressure on Israel in order to end its military occupation. I don't see our government here in the UK, I don't see even my own government in the United States really exerting real leverage in order to bring about a two-state solution or even the end of the Israeli occupation Palestinian lands.
Talk to us about that kind of pressure and that kind of leverage. You'll know that an ultimatum was put in just a few days ago onto the Israelis that if aid was not getting into Gaza, some military aid would be stopped coming from the United States. Is that the only kind of pressure that would possibly tell on the Israelis to completely stop providing military aid? But how, from the US administration, would they even be able to begin to do that, considering the threats that Israel is under from some of its neighbors?
No, the American will never stop providing Israel with arms. They have made it very clear. I mean, imagine it's been 12 months. And think of how many times the Americans and the British have asked the Israelis to minimize the civilian casualties. How many times has the Biden administration told the Israelis to allow humanitarian aid to basically enter Gaza? and Israel has found ways and means to manipulate and get away with it. As we talk, you and I, we're talking about Sinwar, important as he is, as he was. You have now, a humanitarian catastrophe in northern Gaza, in the Palestinian camp called Jabaliyah. 400,000 Palestinians are starving. Starvation, Israel has used starvation as a weapon of war. Yet the Americans keep asking and keep demanding. But at the end of the day, you need to stop the flow of arms. As the French president has made it very clear, once you stop the flow of arms, I think Israel will listen, because America basically feeds this particular war. And no American president, to my mind, will ever do that, because they believe that for a variety of reasons, for electoral reasons in the United States, and also because they believe that Israel is surrounded by hostile states and needs to be armed in order to defend itself.
You say they believe that. Does Israel need to be armed to defend itself from its neighbours?
Well, look, Israel is not defending itself. I'm sorry to say that. You might be surprised.
Professor Gurgis, sorry, those in Iran do not want to see the state of Israel dead.
Well, no, not really. The Jordanian foreign minister, as you remember, in the United Nations just 10 days ago, he said Israel keeps saying that, the neighborhood wants to get rid of it. He said, here we are, 57 states, Arab and Muslim states, we are willing to guarantee Israeli security. This is, Ayman Safadi. And his comments were reported very widely. Netanyahu keeps talking about war and winning. And Ayman Zawahiri was speaking in the name of 57 Arab and Muslim states. He's saying we have proposals on the table for Israel. Let's find a resolution. But at the end of the day, look, Netanyahu and his coalition do not really believe in genuine reconciliation with the Palestinians. They don't believe in a Palestinian state, because if they want to make peace, they have to end their occupation. Again, without American pressure, without American use of leverage, you and I, we can talk about it academically in the media for hours. You need American leverage in order for Israel to basically accept the reality of ending its military occupation.
Look, Professor Fawaz Gurgis, this has been proven. I could probably talk to you all afternoon, but we're going to leave it there. I really do appreciate you joining us and for your expertise and analysis on this situation. Professor Gurgis, always good to have you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks.
All right, we'll be back to the story of Yahya Sinwar shortly, but I just want to bring you an update. We've had some information come in from police in Argentina and Buenos Aires as to their investigation into the death of the One Direction star Liam Payne. The police in Buenos Aires saying that after a search of his hotel room, you'll remember that he died having fallen from a third-floor balcony at a hotel in Buenos Aires. Police found medicine as well as alcohol. The medicine they found was clonazepam, which is a sedative. The room, the police say, was in complete disorder, complete disarray. You will remember there was the emergency call that was given by hotel staff to the emergency services in the moments before Liam Payne's death, where the hotel manager had talked about the room being broken up by those who were inside it. The police said they've taken fingerprints and other evidence to be analysed, and of course the investigation into Liam Payne's death will continue. All right. Well, as I say, we're going to keep across all day here on Sky the aftermath of the death of the One Direction star Liam Payne. But I want to return to our coverage now of the Middle East and back to that news that the Israelis are investigating whether or not Yahya Sinwar has been killed in an operation in which 3 people have died. Now, it is thought that Sinwar had been living with his family in the tunnel network beneath Gaza when Hamas launched the attack of the 7th of October. The IDF released this video footage back on the 13th of February. They claim it showed that Sinwar was in the tunnels, moving through them with his family. You can see here they identify him there with the red ring around his body as well as by his distinctive ears. Now, the IDF released further footage, claimed to have found millions of dollars in a safe that belonged to him. Now, they are continuing to investigate whether or not the military leader of Hamas has been killed in an Israeli operation in the last few hours. We're going to have the very latest on that story the next hour of the show. Well, it is 3 o'clock. You're watching Sky News Today and our continuing coverage on the possibility of the death of the military leader of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar. The death of the leader of Hamas will have huge repercussions. It is reported that he may have been killed in an Israeli operation in Gaza. Now, in a statement posted onto social media, the IDF said, during IDF operations, 3 terrorists were eliminated. The IDF and ISA are checking the possibility one of the terrorists was Yahya Sinwar. At this stage, the identity of the terrorists cannot be confirmed. In the building where the terrorists were eliminated, there were no signs of the presence of hostages in the area. The forces operating in the area are continuing to operate with the required caution. Well, earlier today, an Israeli airstrike on a school in the north of Gaza at the Jabalia refugee camp killed at least 15 people. That is according to the health ministry. The Israeli military says that the strike targeted dozens of Hamas and Islamic Jihad militants who they said had gathered at the school. The Israelis released the names of 12 people they say were militants who were there. It's not yet known whether this attack on Jabalia is the same one in which Sinwar may have been killed. Now, the 61-year-old has led Hamas since 2017. He joined the ranks of the group in the early 1980s. He spent more than 20 years in Israeli prison for killing both Israelis and Palestinians, Palestinians that were suspected of collaborating with Israel. Well, Sinwar was released in 2011 as part of a swap deal for more than 1,000 Palestinian prisoners for one Israeli soldier, Gilad Shalit, who'd been held hostage by Hamas for more than 5 years. Sinwar survived an assassination attempt in 2021 after an Israeli airstrike was reported to have hit his home. He is thought to be the architect of the 7th of October attacks, which killed 1,200 people. Sinwar was at the top of Israel's most wanted list. Now, following the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, the political leader of Hamas in July, Sinwar succeeded him, replaced him as the head of the political bureau and took control of the entire group. Right, let's take you now to Jerusalem. Our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, is standing by. So, Ali, have we got any more information as to this investigation as the Israelis look as to whether or not Yahya Sinwar has been killed?
I think it's looking increasingly likely that he has been killed. I wouldn't quite go as far as to say that it is certain yet, but sources I've been speaking to in the Israeli government and the Israeli military, and I have to say, very high up sources are sounding very confident that Sinwar has been killed. It's the process of identification that is taking place now. So we know that the Israelis have his fingerprints and his DNA from the time that he spent in the Israeli prisons. We understand his body is back or is in Israel now, so it's undergoing those tests. I suspect we will get confirmation one way or the other, but confirmation that he has been killed very shortly indeed. It really, I think the Israeli military and the Israeli government are certain, just beyond that absolute scientific proof from the various forensic tests that need to be done on his body, that they have got their most wanted man, someone who they have been trying to kill for a long time, someone who evaded capture throughout the last 12 and a bit months of war, despite the fact that many of his senior commanders around him were taken out one by one by the Israeli military. Sinwar, we know, was at times hiding in the tunnels below Gaza. You showed that CCTV that the Israeli military released back in February of him going down a tunnel with some members of his family. The Israeli military have said before that they believe they got very close to him on a number of occasions. I think on one stage, perhaps it was a slight exaggeration, but one Israeli general saying they got to a place in a tunnel where his coffee was still warm. But he managed to escape the Israeli military time and time again. And if it turns out to be true that he was killed, and he was killed above ground in perhaps a gunfight, then I think that would be a surprising turn of events, because the working assumption was that he was deep underground and very possibly had surrounded himself with some of the remaining living hostages in order to give himself a degree of protection. But according to the Israeli military statement, no hostages and no sign of any of the hostages were found near the body of the three men. We don't know, we've had no hint as to who, or the identification of the other two, but it does look, as I say, increasingly likely that Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, the mastermind of the October the 7th attacks, has been killed.
Yeah. Ali, thank you for that. It's been reported by the Reuters news agency. The Israeli security cabinet ministers have been told that Sinwar is very likely dead. That's according to two officials who have been informed that it is very likely. That has been reported by two Israeli broadcasters, Kan and N12 News. I want to bring in our international correspondent now, Alex Rossi, who is in the Lebanese capital, Beirut. Alex, great to have you with us. So, look, give us a sense of the wider implications of this, if it is, in fact, confirmed that Yahya Sinwar is dead.
Well, this is I think it probably is a very, very significant moment, in the sense that you now have the possibility of a full stop, a way that the Israelis can draw a line under their campaign in Gaza. That doesn't mean, of course, that it will end at all, because there are many unanswered questions. But it also means as well that you have a route, possibly a diplomatic route, to a political solution to the crisis here in Lebanon as well. Hezbollah, remember, this is a Shia militant group aligned with Iran and Hamas, started firing on Israel in, they say, solidarity with the Gazans when the Israelis launched their campaign after the massacre. You basically have a situation where everybody can pull back from that front. But there are many reasons why the Israelis may continue prosecuting that war. Yes, they've degraded Hezbollah here. They have assassinated Hassan Nasrallah. They've assassinated other members of the leadership here. But they, of course, don't want to go back to the status quo of October the 6th. That is where you had Hezbollah armed to the teeth on the Israeli border, threatening, of course, to go in and do their own October the 7th in northern Israel. That's the Israeli perspective. So it may be that they continue prosecuting the campaign here to try and get as much as they can, so they get a settlement where Hezbollah, of course, pulls back probably above the Litani River, or is even, to a certain extent, de-armed, although that would have to be in agreement with the Lebanese state. And I think that the spectre of that is highly unlikely. But at the heart of all of this, of course, is also the issue of deterrent. I don't think we can overestimate the psychological blow that Israel felt after October the 7th. It was extremely exposed and extremely vulnerable. A lot of the brutality of the campaign in Gaza is demonstrative. It's about showing the rest of the region the power that the Israelis have if you decide to attack them. Some of what we have seen here in Lebanon as well also fits into that pattern as well. Think of the demonstrative nature of the pager attack, the walkie-talkies. It is really showing the region that Israel is not a country to be messed with. So it may be that the Israelis carry on. They don't want to go towards a ceasefire. That said, it is now possible with the removal of Yahya Sinwar to see how you could see that track emerging. Benjamin Netanyahu has been talking about total victory. What better way of turning to your own population and saying, we have won the war against Hamas, we have killed their leadership, and we have significantly degraded them to such an extent that they can no longer attack us. So you can take that victory. That, of course, still leaves the hostages, though, and it still leaves that burning question of what happens in Gaza after the war has been effectively won as a military campaign. And we don't know the answer to those questions.
No, not at this point. Right, Alex, for now in Beirut, thank you for that. Let's bring in Joseph Kuperwas former head of IDF intelligence and research fellow at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. Joseph Kapwasa, thanks so much for making the time to speak to us today. We really do appreciate it. What's your sense of where we are now, as I've just been reporting? It's said by the Khan and N12 News that the cabinet has been told that it is very likely that Sinwar is dead.
I hope it's true. And if it is true, then it's a milestone in our war against Hamas in Gaza. Sinwar is not only the leader of the Palestinian terror group in Gaza, but also the leader of this terror group, Hamas, all over the Middle East. They are located not only in Gaza. And losing their leader is a message to the Palestinians that don't mess around with us. We have said we are going to reach him, and it seems that we have managed to do that. That is a major blow to Hamas, and I hope this is going to be translated into the end of the war in Gaza, in the sense that Hamas will have to evacuate Gaza and bring back the hostages to their homes.
Could it be the moment for a full stop and a drawing of the line in the war in Gaza, Mr. Kapwasa?
It is the beginning of this process, I think. It's bringing down and eliminating Hamas. Hamas leader was one of the elements that would comprise the victory as we see it. It's not enough by itself, but it's a necessary step in order to achieve this goal. It's not sufficient to make it all happen. We need to see that Hamas gives up being the ruler of Gaza and is ready to give back the hostages. These are two steps that are necessary to happen as well before we can say that the war can be over.
Do you have an insight as well into how the hostages can now be negotiated, their release be negotiated at this point, considering the fact that Sinwar, as we understand it, was the person that was conducting the negotiations and in fact was the bloc? Who do the Israelis, who do the mediators get to talk to at this point then, do you think?
I think that there's going to be somebody taking over from Sinwar. There are still some leaders of Hamas there. And definitely there are some leaders that are still outside of Gaza that are in key positions of Hamas. And what we can offer is that for the Hamas operatives that are still in Gaza to leave Gaza and to bring back the hostages, we are ready in this context to release some terrorists from jail and to allow Hamas safe face, but provided that all of the hostages are brought back in one round.
And look, as you mentioned, that if this is confirmed that he is killed, that will be one of the main leaders, and as you said, it will be a sign that those in Hamas can be got to by the Israelis. But what about for the ordinary Palestinians? What happens next for them, do you think? Will there be the chance for there to be peace in the region for both sides?
For sure, yes. I think once Hamas leaves Gaza and once the population in Gaza gets the impression that they are never coming back, there are going to be some leaders from within the population in Gaza that would be ready to assume responsibility for what's happening in the future in Gaza. And we can gradually, and we have to go through a process of de-radicalization and getting rid of the Palestinian narrative of destroying Israel and the narrative that led to 7th of October. We have to understand the Palestinians, under the leadership of Sinwar, carried out the 7th of October massacre because they believed this is the right thing to do. This didn't commit a crime in their mind. In their mind, they did the right thing.
It's okay. We've still got you. Sorry. No, thank you. We can still hear you fine. So
they believe they did the right thing, and I think that we have to de-radicalize them and to take away from their minds this narrative. The more we make progress in this direction, the greater are the chances that we shall be able to form some sort of a coexistence with the Palestinians.
And use the word coexistence, so let's explore that. So does that mean then that there should be a sense that there will be a functional Palestinian state back on the borders of 67 as has been hoped for by many?
I think it's so early to speak about the final status situation. There's still a long way of de-radicalization that has to be performed. Look, it's not only Hamas. We were talking also about the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority is committed to this narrative of destroying Israel and is not ready to accept Israel as a Jewish state and is paying salaries to terrorists who are in Israeli jails because they killed the Jews. So this is where we stand at this point. To speak about allowing a Palestinian state and when at this point of time is really too early. We have to create the conditions that would enable us to even discuss it.
But Joseph, do you not see that, will that not be the forever war that people are talking about? That if without that sort of horizon, and I'm talking about for Israelis and for Palestinians as well, without the horizon that says that this is what we're going to do going forward, that there is the very real possibility that the fighting, the anger on both sides will just continue?
Well, I think really it's it's too early to discuss it. We have to still deal with the Iranian axis of evil that is trying to destroy Israel. We are fighting against Hezbollah. We are fighting against the Houthis in Yemen. We are fighting against the Iraqi militias in Iraq that are subordinated to Iran. We have troubles with the Syrians. We have troubles in the West Bank in areas controlled by the Palestinian Authority. And we, of course, have troubles with the Iranians themselves. So it's to speak now about what's going to happen in 20 years. I hope it's going to be possible to see a different approach by the Palestinians that looks for cooperation, just like the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and many other countries in the Arab world are ready to establish normal relations with Israel. Once that is accomplished, everything is possible. But let's not create expectations that cannot be fulfilled too early.
What will it mean, do you think, for the people of Israel if it is confirmed that Yahya Sinwar has been killed?
And we are in an ongoing effort to clarify to everybody around us that the idea of launching a terror attack like the one we saw on October 7th was a big mistake, huge mistake. And one of the ways to do that is by allowing them to understand that they are going to pay a very heavy price for that. And Sinwar's death, if confirmed, is a part of this payment that they are going to pay for doing what they did. And it's going to deter them, I hope so, from even thinking about another 7th of October. So far, we haven't managed to do that. You will listen to the Palestinians until now. They still promise us another 7th of October whenever it's possible. I think by eliminating Sinwar, we have a better chance to expect that something else is going to develop on the other side of the border.
Could it not be the case, though, that eliminating Sinwar produces more people who have the same ideology as him?
So can you repeat it? I didn't understand.
Could it not be the case, Yosef Kapawasa, that eliminating Sinwar and the leadership of Hamas in this way creates more people with that same ideology?
No, because most of the Palestinians have this ideology anyhow. You know, it's not a problem of having more people. You see the joy with which the Palestinians accepted the 7th of October massacre, the jubilations and the celebrations that they had following 7th of October tells you that many, many, many Palestinians believe in the same ideology that Hamas has. As a matter of fact, according to public opinion polls, they had support of something like 75% of the population. So it's we don't have to worry about more Palestinians adopting the Sinwar approach to Israel. I hope, on the other end, just contrary, that the results of this war will convince more Palestinians to go through some sort of soul searching. I see that from time to time among the Palestinians, that they say to themselves, maybe we did the wrong move. And I hope many more will accept that this was a wrong move and try to think of something more positive to do with themselves.
What do you think will be the decision from the cabinet, from Benjamin Netanyahu, if this is confirmed? Where will he want to take this next?
Well, I think what we are going to see is trying to leverage this development, which is a milestone, as I said, in order to promote the idea of building a new reality in Gaza, a reality that we have Gaza without Hamas, without terrorism, not governed by Hamas and not populated by, not having terrorists of Hamas everywhere, and without the indoctrination, the hate indoctrination that Hamas and the Palestinian Authority have used against the people of Gaza. And once we manage to get Hamas out of Gaza, we can start the reconstruction of Gaza. We can start something positive for the people of Gaza and for the region and for everybody else.
Absolutely. Okay, Joseph Kapuasa, former head of IDF intelligence. Really good to have you on this afternoon. Thanks so much for making the time to speak to us, Joseph.
Thank you.
Right, now it is thought that Yahya Sinwar had been living with his family in the tunnel network beneath Gaza when Hamas launched their attack against Israel on the 7th of October. Now, this video was released by the Israeli military back in February, claiming to show Sinwar and his family moving through a tunnel. The IDF released more footage, claiming to have found millions in cash in a safe that had belonged to Sinwar. And on this week's The World podcast, our world presenter Yalda Hakim discussed with her co-host Richard Engel why Israel had been unable to reach Sinwar up until now.
Israeli security and defense establishment will say to me when I say, why haven't you got Yahya Sinwar's head on a plate right now? They will say, we know where he is, we know what he's doing, we know he's in these tunnels, but he's surrounded himself with our hostages. So we're not about to kill 10, 15 Israeli hostages to get Yahya Sinwar. Now, Hassan Nasrallah did live in hiding. He gave his sermons in hiding. He lived underground for decades because of concern around Israeli assassination, but not to the same extent as Yahya Sinwar. And perhaps he thought on some level this was a red line that the Israelis wouldn't cross.
All right, well, let's speak now to a former head of research and analysis for the Mossad and the current head of the Iran program for the Institute of National Security Studies, Seema Shine. Seema, thanks so much for making the time to speak to us today. First of all, let's just get your reaction to this news that is seemingly developing across the afternoon that Yahya Sinwar has in fact been killed.
Well, it looks more and more that it is being confirmed, even though there is no formal confirmation from the Israeli military or government. And of course, it is within the struggle of more than a year now. It is an important achievement. At the end of the day, it is the person who decided to launch this attack on the 7th of October. And to not only that he decided, he also trained his people what to do. Everybody that penetrated Israel knew exactly to which village or kibbutz or something he is going. This was a very, very accurate plan for Sinwar, and no question that the elimination of him is an important step in the direction of finishing and completing this war. It will probably take some more time, but this is something that this is a very important step in the direction of bringing a solution, a partial or full solution to the question of Gaza.
Yeah, the mastermind of that 7th of October attacks, Seema, as you rightly point out, but I noticed as well that you said that this is a step towards bringing an end to the war. The destruction of this Hamas leadership, because of course Sinwar, if proven right, it will be gone. Ismail Haniyeh has been eliminated as well as Mohammed Daif, so all the leadership has been killed. Does that complete one of the Israeli war aims? And why do you suggest that this is just a step towards the end of the conflict?
Because I think, first of all, what Israel wants to achieve in Gaza is to make sure that Hamas doesn't rule Gaza anymore and is not able to plan any attack on Israel and execute any attack on Israeli through Israeli border. So this is the aim. I think Sinwar was a very focal point within this establishment in Gaza. And in spite of all the others that have been already killed during the war, and some very important and very focal people, commanders and others, he was the leader. He was elected after Haniyeh to be the leader of the what they call the political committee. So he was not only the military one, but also the political one. And he was very, very important in any decision taken upon Gaza. He didn't want to leave. He didn't want to get out. Israel proposed. There were several proposals given to him to leave Gaza and to go somewhere else. He didn't want to do it. And he wanted to remain in Gaza in order to make sure that some part, even if there is any kind of a political arrangement, a different political arrangement in Gaza, Hamas will have a part in this arrangement. So the fact that he is not with us anymore, even though you probably know that his brother, that was very close to him and was also one of the three important leaders of the Hamas group, is still alive, probably. And so there is someone that can continue and take decisions and be negotiated with. But I do believe that the more Hamas is weakened, the better we are in the process, to a political solution that will benefit Israel, but at the same time, the Palestinians in Gaza as well.
And Seema, talk to us about that block on there being any kind of negotiated peace that Sinwar presented. As the person who was negotiating for the release of the hostages and for whatever agreements had been offered, how his removal potentially allows for there to be more space. Is that your instinct? Is that your hope that could happen?
It's more than a hope. I think that when we look on what happened in the last year, and when we look on the conditions that he has put in the negotiations that the Americans through the Qataris and the Egyptians were holding with him, the demands were those that couldn't promote any hostage agreement and any agreement on the future of Gaza. So I do think that the fact that he is probably not with us anymore is an important development in the decision-making of those who are still in Gaza, Hamas, people that are still in Gaza, to think again how they can finish this war. I can tell you that in the last weeks and even more than weeks, 2 months, Sinwar didn't have any intention to do any release, any deal on hostages, because he was believing that the situation is playing into his hands because of the war with Hezbollah, because of the attacks of Iran on Israel already 2 times. So he felt that time is playing into his hands. I think now their calculation will be different. And in a different calculation, it might support us in the process of going to a solution for Gaza.
That's really interesting. Look, you mentioned his brother. What do we know about his brother, whether or not he shares the same ideology as Yahya Sinwar, and what is the sense as to whether he is the person most likely to take over?
I think he is the most likely to take over in Gaza. I don't know what will be about their political leadership. That is, most of them are in Qatar. There are some debates among themselves also. But no question that if he is alive, and I assume he is for the time being, that means that he will take the leadership of his brother. They work together all the time. He shares the same vision and the same ideological approach vis-a-vis Israel and the war. So I don't think there will be personally, I don't think he's a good hope. Actually, on the contrary. But I do hope that the developments and the fact that Sinwar is not there anymore will bring him and the people around him to rethink the policy that they have conducted until today, and perhaps will also support a change. If there will be a change, I think there are some options, there's some political options with neighboring countries, as well as with some, could be even a symbolic representative of the PA, Palestinian Authority.
Yep.
But probably mostly with other Sunni Arab countries in the region that do have an interest in ending this long war.
So it seems then, Seema, from the way you describe it, there potentially could be an inflection point here, a fork in the road moment as to how this thing is prosecuted going forward. We heard earlier from Yosef Kupawasa that this could be a moment of change, from Professor Gerges saying that his fear would be that this is now a chance for Benjamin Netanyahu to push further forward and make this a wider war. What's your sense as to where this could go at this moment, and which direction we end up going in from here on?
I think we don't push further a war, because the war is today on a low level, but we are fighting against any new. Hamas is trying to recruit new people and to establish new cells of terror activists, and we are fighting against them. And I hope at the end of the day, it's a political decision. You know, all wars are at the end finished with a political decision on one side and the other, and the kind of, it doesn't have even to be a kind of a full agreement, but the decision, a political decision has to be taken in Gaza that they want to stop the war, and they are willing to pay the price. And the price is that they will not rule Gaza anymore. Probably you know that Israel has left Gaza in 2005. Has left Gaza when the PA, Palestinian Authority, with Abu Mazen as their president, was the one who was responsible for Gaza. And Hamas took the Gaza also under using force against their own brothers, Palestinians, and kicking them out of Gaza. So I hope that Gaza will go back to its people and under a kind of it cannot be under the PA, because the PA is not cannot be responsible because of its problems, internal problems, corruption, and the inefficiency and everything, but a kind of a mandate of the region, the region, perhaps with American or EU support. This could be something for a period of time, and it trying to radicalize the people and the education system and everything, and build up and rebuild Gaza.
Sinwar, I'm glad you got us to that point, because you know, as we still wait to find out exactly what's happened to Sinwar, the thought about what comes next is a key and personal one, and it's one I think worthy of discussion. With that in mind, if there is some kind of mandate, and of course no one has any idea of what kind of structure that would take, do you think that there needs to be something from the Israeli government at this point that sort of suggests that that could be the direction forward? Because as we understand it at the moment, it would seem as if Benjamin Netanyahu and many within his cabinet do not want to see anything like that, and would actually prefer for there to be perhaps occupation going forward of Gaza.
Well, I think, first of all, as far as I know, there are already talks conducted between Israel, the US, and the Emirates on different issues related to Gaza. There are some in the government, there are not the majority in the government, that do think that the only way to make sure that Gaza is not a threat to Israel in the future, the only way is by a military occupation of the region. I don't think so. I completely disagree, and I think it is a burden on Israel that shouldn't be taken. And I think that Netanyahu is not in the same place. He has in his government some people that think this way, but I don't think they are the majority. I don't think the army is supporting that. As far as I know, they are not. And I do hope that we will see a kind of, but what is important, the basic should be Hamas will not rule Gaza. And not only will not rule Gaza from the civilian point of view, but also from the military point of view, because they cannot stay. You know, we had an example in Lebanon that Hezbollah was a part of the political system, but at the same time also a terror organization equipped in the best equipment that they got from Iran. So we cannot allow in Gaza the same situation, even if there is a kind of a government, that a technocrat government or something like that, that will pretend to be without any affiliation to Hamas. It has to be also with the assurance that Hamas doesn't hold the weapons they have and doesn't produce new weapons. They are, if they want to be assimilated within the system, this way or the other, in people that will be working in different ministries and others, but they cannot hold the weapons. We don't want in Gaza to see the same system as we saw in Lebanon.
Look, and you've widened it out for me as well, Sima, there. So if this is in fact the news that we can report going forward, that Sinwar is dead, what does that mean for the wider war? Of course, in mind that the situation in Lebanon, there have been continued airstrikes and continued fighting along the border.
I think, first of all, we see that in both cases, in Lebanon and in Gaza, everything that was prepared in order really to annihilate Israel, this way or the other, even if not killing everyone, is now distracted. Israel is now taking care of it, and it will not allow in both sides of the border, in the north and in the south, Israel will not allow any buildup anymore of such an army and such a construction, military construction, mostly underground, things that have been found in Lebanon are much more sophisticated than those in Gaza. Gaza is a small one and it's very close on our border and everything. But in what we found in Lebanon on our border is unbelievable. And this cannot remain and of course cannot be rebuilt in the future. So there is a very, very concrete demand in both cases to rearm those groups. They can be part of the system. We are not deciding who is the political system in those two places, but they cannot have their own independent army, weapons, getting weapons from Iran. We didn't touch Iran yet, but this is the core problem of the Middle East, I think. But in both cases, I think what happened, that the leadership is not there anymore, neither in Lebanon nor in Gaza. I think it will bring those people that remain to rethink if they want to continue in this direction or they want to come to any kind of a political arrangement that will allow Israel to live in peace with those two, and they will also have their own peace.
Yeah, and final question, and you brought us to it. It's your special subject here at the moment, Iran. You said Israel has not yet touched Iran, of course. We're still waiting on a response to that 180 ballistic missile barrage that came a couple of weeks ago. Will the killing of Sinwar change any calculation, do you think, Seema, in terms of what kind of response can be expected from the Israelis?
I don't think it is connected. I think what happened between Israel and Iran is a very unique situation and a very precedent one, that Iran decided to cross the Rubicon and attack Israel. So it was once in April and the second time in August, much more stronger than in the first time. Not effective too much, but stronger, and they could be harmful. And I think from Israel's point of view, Israel feels that it has to make sure that deterrence vis-a-vis Iran continues, and therefore there will be a retaliation. I'm sure about that. I don't think the killing of Sinwar is not directly connected, but I do think that Iran has a major role in everything that is happening in the region, mostly in Lebanon, of course, but also in Gaza. And I think it's time for Iran to reconsider its policy in the region. They have built all this chain of militias that are operating together under the auspices of Iran from the point of view of weapons, money, and also orders. So I believe Iran is also rethinking its policies, and I do hope that after Israeli retaliation, which will be, they will decide not to retaliate and not to open a new escalation, because otherwise this could escalate to a very dangerous situation.
Okay, Seema Shine from the Institute for National Security Studies and former Mossad. Thanks so much for being with us. Really do appreciate getting your expertise on this story, Seema. It's always good to have you. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
All right, let me just give you the latest on this developing story that could have huge repercussions for the wider Middle East, as Seema was just saying there. The Israeli military is checking reports that it has killed the leader of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, in Gaza. In a statement posted on X, the IDF said, during IDF operations, 3 terrorists were eliminated. The IDF and ISA are checking the possibility one of the terrorists was Yahya Sinwar. At this stage, the identity of the terrorists cannot be confirmed. In the building where the terrorists were eliminated, there were no signs of the presence of hostages in the area. The forces operating in the area are continuing to operate with the required caution. Well, earlier today, an Israeli airstrike on a school in Jabalia in the north of Gaza killed at least 15 people. That's according to the health ministry. The Israeli military said that the strike targeted dozens of Hamas and Islamic Jihad militants they claimed had gathered there. They released the names of 12 people who they say were there. It's not yet known whether this attack in Jabalia is the same one in which Sinwar may have been killed. So just who is Yahya Sinwar? He's a 61-year-old who's been the leader of Hamas since 2017. He joined Hamas in the early 80s. He spent more than 20 years in prison for killing both Israelis and Palestinians who were suspected of collaborating with Israel. In 2011, he was released as part of a huge swap deal that saw 1,000 Palestinian prisoners released for one Israeli soldier, Gilad Shalit. Shalit had been held hostage by Hamas for more than 5 years. It's reported that Sinwar survived an assassination attempt in 2021 after an Israeli airstrike hit his home. He is the architect, believed to be the architect of the 7th of October attacks that killed around 1,200 people, and he was top of Israel's most wanted list. Well, following the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran in July, Sinwar replaced him as head of the political bureau, taking control of Hamas. Right, let's go back to our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle. And Ali, look, I'm sure you've been calling around your sources. That news that's been reported by two Israeli broadcasters, Kan and N12 News, saying that it is very likely dead, is sort of the closest we've had to confirmation of this. What's your sense of where we are right now? And what has been the reaction in Israel to this news in the past hour or so?
Well, I mean, that's the sentiment I'm getting from political and military sources. One telling me that it is probable that this was Sinwar, another one saying it looks like him. But the forensic tests are being done, we believe, at the moment. I think confirmation could come within a few short hours. They need to determine beyond doubt that it is Yahya Sinwar, but the photographs of his body that have been circulating on social media certainly look like him. And the messages I'm getting from people within the Israeli military and Israeli government, as I say, are ones of confidence that they have got Yahya Sinwar. So we await official confirmation, but it is looking increasingly likely that the Israeli forces have managed to kill the head of Hamas after more than a year of trying unsuccessfully to find him in Gaza. I mean, in terms of the mood in Israel, it's a Jewish holiday, the holiday of Sukkot at the moment, so most people aren't at work. It's very quiet here. The news will be getting out, and of course it will be welcomed by everybody. Sinwar was the mastermind of the Hamas attacks on October the 7th. He was Israel's most wanted man, and the fact that he's now been killed, if that turns out to be true, is not something that I think anybody in Israel will mourn for a moment. It raises a lot of questions, though, about what comes next, what happens with the war in Gaza, what happens with the remaining hostages inside Gaza, and where 12 and a bit months of fighting go from here.
OK. Ali, thank you for that. Let's, just before we bring in our international correspondent, Alex Rossi, who's in Beirut, I just want to bring you a tweet that we've had from the Israeli Defense Minister, Yav Gallant. He's posted an image of Mohammed Daif, of Hassan Nasrallah. Mohammed Daif from Hamas, who was killed by the Israelis earlier this year. Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, of course, killed by the Israelis just a few weeks ago, and a figure there that has got a cross against it. And a quote from Leviticus 26 saying, "You will pursue your enemies and they will fall before your sword. Our enemies cannot hide. We will pursue and eliminate them." I mean, Ali, that's the defence minister posting that on social media. Very suggestive of the fact that, you know, they are conducting this analysis, but thinking it likely that they have got this man. And then, of course, the question is, and as I was putting to Seema Shiner and Yosef Kupawasa, what's the choice is then in terms of pursuing this war in Gaza?
Yeah, it's a cryptic tweet by Yav Gallant, but it is no coincidence in its timing. So, again, like what we're hearing off the record from Israeli sources, I think Yav Gallant saying it there on a tweet, and albeit in a slightly more flourishing way, that they believe they have got Yahya Sinwar. I was saying just in my last answer to you that his death will be met with rejoice by the people of Israel. It'll be very interesting to see, though, how it is met in Gaza itself. Sinwar was revered by many Palestinians, many in Gaza, for the fact that he led the resistance against Israel. I think it's quite significant that he was, and again, everything I say here is predicated on the assumption that we will hear confirmation of his death in the coming hours. But I think it's quite significant if those pictures are to be believed, that he was killed above ground, and it looks like wearing combat fatigues as well. What I mean by that is that Gazans have lived through, months and months of heavy Israeli bombardment, heavy Israeli fighting. They've had their homes completely flattened. Almost all of them have been displaced, many multiple times over. More than 1.5 million are living in a makeshift humanitarian zone. There's a humanitarian crisis. There is a severe lack of food and aid. And so had Sinwar been killed hiding in a tunnel somewhere away from the destruction above ground, then maybe there would have been a feeling of great resentment from the Palestinians towards their supposed leader in Gaza for the fact that he had started this war by the October the 7th attacks and was then hiding below ground. It doesn't look as though it was like that. It looks like he was above ground and killed perhaps in a gun battle. And so that could resonate quite strongly with people in Gaza, that the leader of Hamas was a part of the fight against Israeli forces. So it'd be very interesting to see how that goes down in Gaza. I mean, don't make the assumption, despite everything that Gazans have been through, don't make the assumption that he was an unpopular figure. He still retained popularity amongst many in Gaza. Of course, huge numbers of them have more important thoughts about how to feed their families, where to live, where to get shelter, and are extremely angry about the numbers of deaths. But Hamas and Yahya Sinwar still had a significant degree of popularity in Gaza.
Absolutely. All right, Ali, for now, appreciate that. Thank you. Let's cross to Lebanese capital Beirut and bring in Alex Rossi, our international correspondent. And Alex, look, as we continue to wait for full confirmation that Sinwar has been killed, has there been any reaction at all in the wider region to this possibility of the past couple hours?
Well, I think people are watching this very, very closely indeed. Is it the transformative moment? We don't know, but certainly people that I've been speaking to suggest that this may be a path to de-escalation. Now, it might be a meandering path, it might take some time, but you now have an event and a possibility where you can see a way out of this crisis. Now, there are a lot of ifs, buts and whats in all of that that we simply don't know the answer to. I think one thing is clear, and that is that Israel will not accept the status quo of October the 6th, particularly when it comes to Lebanon and Hezbollah, the Shia militant group armed by the Iranians that's sitting on its border. It's not going to allow that to continue. Now, whether or not that means they will continue to prosecute the war that they have been here and do it in a fashion that is extraordinarily hard, we wait and see. But it may very well be that groups like Hezbollah, it too has been decapitated, losing its leader, Hassan Nasrallah. It may very well start signalling, actually, we are prepared to take compromises. We have been significantly degraded. They won't say it, of course, in these words, but they will have to accept that it isn't the continuation of business as normal. They are not the same fighting force that they were before October the 6th. They have been exposed and they have been penetrated by Israeli intelligence, and they have shown to be pretty weak in many places. Now, that brings me now to the Iranians as well, and you can say the same thing of them. What is their reaction to all of this going to be? Because remember that Israel is fighting on multi-fronts, but it's essentially this three conflicts going on. The Hamas one with Israel, Hezbollah, and Israel, and then Iran, and of course there are the proxies around the region. But how will the Iranians take all of this? Certainly, the Israelis may very well think that this is a time to try and reshape the Middle East, get as much as they can and turn over that status quo. They are certainly on the front foot when it comes to the fighting. And when you factor in as well another significant part of all of this, and that is re-establishing deterrent. After October the 7th, they took a massive psychological blow. They want to show that they're confident and that they are back. That may take some time, but certainly that path to diplomacy and de-escalation is more likely today after this event than it was yesterday.
All right. Alex in Beirut. Thank you for that. Let's speak now to Yusuf Al-Halou, a British Palestinian activist who has lost family members in Gaza. Yusuf, thanks so much for joining us. Let me first of all just get your reaction to this, what seems a developing story, the news that Sinwar may be dead. I don't think we have the line to Yusuf, unfortunately. My apologies, but if we can re-establish the line to Yusuf, we will do. Unfortunately, his picture seems to be frozen. The technology may well have let us down. Yusuf, I'm going to try one more time. Can you hear me okay?
Hello?
Hello, Yusuf. No, I don't think we can connect with him properly. So we'll try again to speak to Yusuf Al-Halou and get his sense of where we are with all of this. But thankfully, Alex in Beirut hasn't gone too far away, so we can bring him back in. And Alex, I don't know if you were able to hear any of my conversation with Seema Shine, former Mossad, who now runs a unit looking specifically at the threat from Iran. She was keen to sort of disentangle any sense of Israeli response to Iran and the killing of Sinwar. But do you think it can in any way change the calculus of the Israeli wider war if this particular war aim of killing one of the leaders of Hamas is complete?
Well, on one hand, when you listen to the militias, you listen to groups like Hezbollah, what is happening in Gaza is coupled to what they are doing here against Israel. So Hezbollah made it very, very clear on October the 8th, when they started launching missiles and rockets at northern communities in Israel, that they were doing it in solidarity with Gaza. If there was a ceasefire, they claimed that they would stop, and we had heard the same thing with the Houthis as well. Now, whether or not the Israelis will be minded to move on that diplomatic path, if, of course, Yahya Sinwar, if it's confirmed that he is dead, we don't know. It goes back to what I was saying earlier, that actually they may see this still as a moment where they can take more. Now, in terms of the Iranian question, I think that is quite right. It isn't essentially, it's not a necessary connection between Yahya Sinwar and the attack that we saw on October the 1st with the ballistic missiles. I think in Israel, there is this sense that they absolutely do need to respond to that, and they need to respond quite harshly for their own security, not least of all as a deterrent. Whether or not they will recalibrate that, because they are now thinking perhaps this is more likely to move along a diplomatic line more quickly, again, we don't know. But certainly up until this point, the words, the noises coming from Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, and people around him, is that this response to the Iranians is going to be quite punishing. Now, behind the scenes, various sources have been reporting from Washington that the dial has been moved slightly, and we think that's probably connected, or the result of that we see connected with the delivery of this terminal high-altitude defence system, this anti-ballistic missile system, which needs American troops to operate it, sent to Israel. Israel has drawn back from, the maximalist response, which would have been hitting perhaps nuclear sites. Not that many people think they'd have the capability to do that alone, but they certainly seem to have pulled back from hitting energy infrastructure, and it now seems to be more military sites from what we understand. But I think that response will still come. I think just simply as a matter of deterrence, they will not let what happened on October the 1st with this mass ballistic missile attack on Israel, they won't let that go unanswered. So I think that attack is still coming. The question mark, of course, is whether or not that leads to further escalation from the Iranians. Now, they might very well look at what's happened in Gaza, the leadership there decapitated, Hamas severely degraded, the same thing happening here to Hezbollah, and they may think, actually, we don't want to escalate this because of the consequences. Look at the military posture from the Americans. They have signalled very firmly, they've given Israel a bear hug They're not going anywhere, and they don't want to see the Americans dragged into this at all. So they may silently say, well, the Israelis didn't do much damage after the attack, and it may just sort of fizzle out. So it may be that the chance of a wider regional conflagration, a big regional war, with the death of Yahya Sinwar, the assassination of Yahya Sinwar, if indeed that does turn to pass, has drawn the sting out of that slightly. But this is still, make no mistake, it's still a very worrying time in the Middle East, and there is still much that could go very wrong indeed.
Absolutely right about that. Alex Rossi, our international correspondent there in Beirut. Alex, I'm going to keep you with me just for one more question, and I want you to give us a big picture thought about this and about, you know, the American potential reaction response to if it is proven to be right that Sinwar has been killed. What will that mean, do you think, for Israeli allies and also for those nations in the region close by, Lebanon, Jordan, those other nations in the region that just want to see an end to the war in Gaza?
Well, my understanding is that it's certainly been, the Israelis have signalled to the Americans that they have got their man. Of course, they are waiting for the dental records, they're waiting for the DNA to confirm that. But I think it would be quite hard to believe that they have not got Yahya Sinwar. They seem pretty confident in everything that they're doing and everything they are saying. I think the thing when it comes to the United States, I think, of course, is the election that's coming up on November the 5th. I think that's going to be, people will watch and wait to see what happens there. And it may very well be that any diplomacy that is borne out has to wait in and factor in, of course, who is likely to arrive in the White House after Joe Biden finishes off his term. But I think that route to diplomacy now with Yahya Sinwar gone is an open one. Certainly Benjamin Netanyahu now has the room to turn to his country, to turn to the people around in his cabinet and say, look, we've accomplished our mission. We've severely degraded Hamas and we have, killed the man at the top of it. So he can now draw back. There's still, of course, the question of the hostages, but there is enough room now for perhaps diplomacy to be restarted.
Perhaps. All right, Alex, for now in Beirut, really appreciate that. Alex Rossi there, our international correspondent in the Lebanese capital, Beirut, on his reflections as we continue our coverage of the news that the Israelis are investigating whether or not they have killed the military leader of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, who has been hiding in Gaza since the October the 7th attacks that he masterminded, is being investigated as to whether or not he is dead. We'll have the very latest at the top of the next hour. It is 4 o'clock. You're watching Sky News Today and our continuing coverage on a developing story that could have huge repercussions for the Middle East. The Israeli military is checking reports that it has killed the leader of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, in Gaza. In a statement posted on social media, the IDF said, during operations, 3 terrorists were eliminated. The IDF and ISA are checking the possibility that one of the terrorists was Yahya Sinwar. At this stage, the identity of the terrorists cannot be confirmed. In the building where the terrorists were eliminated, there were no signs of the presence of hostages in the area. The forces operating in the area are continuing to operate with the required caution. Well, earlier today it was reported an Israeli airstrike on a school in Jabalia in the north of Gaza killed at least 15 people. That's according to the Hamas-run health ministry. The Israeli military said the strike targeted dozens of Hamas and Islamic Jihad militants they had claimed had gathered at the school. It released the names of 12 people who were there. It's not known whether the attack on Jabalia is the same one that may have killed Sinwar. So who is the leader of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar? Now, he's led the group since 2017, joining Hamas in the early 1980s. He spent more than 20 years in an Israeli prison for killing both Israelis and Palestinians. The Palestinians were suspected of collaborating with Israel. In 2011, he was released as part of a huge swap deal for more than 1,000 Palestinian prisoners. They were swapped for one Israeli soldier, Gilad Shalit, who had been held hostage by Hamas for more than 5 years. Sinwar reportedly survived an assassination attempt in 2021, and an airstrike was said to have hit his house. Now, he is believed to be the architect, the mastermind behind the 7th of October attacks that killed 1,200 people. He was on top of Israel's most wanted list, and following the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh in July, Yahya Sinwar replaced him as head of the political bureau and took control of the entirety of Hamas. All right, let's bring in our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, for the latest and, of course, more on this. And Ali, look, as we're continuing to wait for confirmation, if it does in fact come soon, that Yahya Sinwar has been killed, what more do we know about the circumstances of this attack by the IDF in which these 3 terrorists were killed?
Well, we only know what is being put around as rumour at the moment, and that includes some pictures that purport to be the body of Yahya Sinwar clearly dead. And if those pictures are true, he is in the rubble of, I guess, what was a house or a building of some description, up above ground, not below ground. There was an assumption by many that he had been hiding below ground, which he certainly had been for a long time in this war, but that he would eventually be found underground or killed in an airstrike in a tunnel, possibly surrounded by some of the hostages as well, that there was a theory that he had used them as a human shield. If these pictures, and I say if, that are on social media turn out to be accurate and true, he was above ground, he was wearing combat fatigues, and as we do know for a fact, he was with at least 2 other people that have also been killed. Those identities, or any hint of those identities, haven't been released at the moment. But again, I think when the Israeli government, I suspect Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu makes a statement on this, we might discover the identities of the other 2 as well. So how he was found by the IDF, again, that is an open question. It doesn't seem as though, from what we're hearing, that they had intelligence that led them to his whereabouts. It could have been by chance that they found him, and those chances were always going to increase the longer Israeli forces kept prosecuting this war inside Gaza and kept uncovering tunnels and going through houses. And it looks like he was potentially found by chance. But I think the fact that he was found above ground and wearing combat fatigues is quite significant. His death, when it's confirmed, will be celebrated by people in Israel. He was Israel's #1 enemy. He was the mastermind of the October the 7th attacks. He was behind Israel's darkest day. For Palestinians, he, for many years, was the symbol of the resistance against Israel. He was the leader who took Israel on. And had he been found dead, cowering inside a tunnel, it might have created the impression that whilst the rest of Gaza was being turned to rubble and people were living hand to mouth, their supposed leader was hiding away from all the fighting. That doesn't look as though it's the case. It looks as though he was above ground and perhaps involved in some sort of gunfight with Israeli forces. And the fact is that that will not go unnoticed by many, not just in Gaza, but in the wider Arab world, that Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, was killed, possibly, whilst taking the fight himself to the IDF.
And Ali, then, if this is confirmed that Sinwar is dead, it presents, I guess, yet another crossroads, fork in the road for decision-making as to what happens next, whether or not the killing of Sinwar, coupled with the killing of Daif earlier in the year, and of course Ismail Haniyeh as well, all the top leadership of Hamas could now be dead, whether or not that brings an end to the fighting, end to the war in Gaza and the release of hostages, or if another path is taken and continued occupation of Gaza is what happens next.
It raises a lot of questions, none of which, to be honest, we can answer with any certainty. For example, as you alluded to, who would take over from Yahya Sinwar? Well, possibly his brother, Mohammed Sinwar, if he is still alive. I can't think of anybody else who might be up at the upper echelons of the Hamas power structure still alive. Mohammed Sinwar, though, if it were to be him, he's not as revered amongst Hamas as his brother was, so he's not a like-for-like replacement. There is still a political element of Hamas in Qatar and elements in Turkey as well, and Hamas has also got a significant presence in Lebanon. But in terms of who would take over in Gaza, we don't know, and that itself leads to further questions. Who would the Israelis and others negotiate with in terms of trying to get a ceasefire? What about getting the hostages out? 101 Israeli hostages remain inside Gaza. Well, who's going to conduct those negotiations now? Will there be more moderate elements of Hamas compared to Yahya Sinwar who might be more prepared to do a deal with Israel now? We're told that Sinwar was the person who was blocking deals in recent weeks and months. What of the remaining Hamas fighters in Gaza? Will they continue to fight, or will they perhaps conclude that this war is effectively lost and put down their weapons for their own personal survival? And, you know, what about the sort of the bigger, the broader, the day after plan? Who's going to rebuild Gaza? I think that particular question, I don't think we're anywhere near that now. I think Israel is yet to articulate exactly what it sees as being the future of Gaza. We don't know what Benjamin Netanyahu's vision is. He wants to see, he says, a security force take over Gaza that is not Hamas, but he won't say exactly who, and he seems to be reluctant to suggest it could be a Palestinian force of any kind. But at the same time, there's nobody else putting their hand up. There's no other country pushing themselves forward to say they would take over the security of Gaza. So I think the most likely scenario, regardless of what happens if Sinwar is dead, is that the Israeli military will remain in Gaza for the foreseeable and potentially for quite a long time. But how it affects Hamas as a group and whether they continue to fight in the same way, it remains to be seen. But I don't think we should assume that just because Sinwar is dead, that also equals the death of Hamas, or at least the fight within Hamas. And I don't think that just because Sinwar is dead, we should assume that they will find it impossible to find a new leader. They will find a new leader, but who that leader is and what approach they have to the ongoing war is another open question.
Yeah, it remains open, doesn't it, Ali, as to, of course, what this does to any hope of there being an end to all the violence and occupation. Right, Ali, look, for us, just stay there for now, while you can. There hasn't been much, if any, international reaction to any of this so far, as the Israelis say they are still investigating. whether or not they have killed Yahya Sinwar. But the lobby, which a group of journalists who get to ask questions to the Prime Minister's staff, have asked a question of this to the staff, and there's been a response here. A lobby briefing just in the last few minutes saying that when asked about Yahya Sinwar, the potential of his death, they said, "We support Israel's right to self-defense and prevent the terror attacks of 7th of October happening again. We continue to support diplomatic efforts to ensure ceasefire and release of all the hostages," but it's too soon to comment in response to whether or not the IDF have killed the Hamas leaders. They point journalists to the Israeli for any further statements, and again await the Israelis, but say that they support Israel's right to self-defense and prevention of any terror attacks from happening, and they continue to support diplomatic efforts to ensure a ceasefire comes about. That remains the priority. So very little reaction so far from any governments outside of the region, and very brief comment from the British government through the lobby briefing, saying that we are waiting to see and verifying the facts to find out whether or not it is the case that Yahya Sinwar has been killed. All right, let's cross to Lebanon, to the Lebanese capital, Beirut, where our international correspondent Alex Rossi is for us today. And Alex, give us a sense of the impacts that this news, if it is proven correct that Sinwar is dead, could have on the wider region.
Well, this is a very significant moment, Kamali. People are watching this very, very closely indeed. We've not had official comment yet here because people are still waiting for the official confirmation from the Israelis that Yahya Sinwar is dead. But I think the reaction here so far is that people really think that he probably has met his demise in Gaza. The hope, of course, is that now we are closer to the end of this crisis than we were yesterday, before this news had happened. But there is still a lot that could go wrong. There are a lot of ifs, buts and whats when it comes to all of that. I think you need to go back to the beginning here in terms of how the crisis erupted. Hezbollah, a Shia militant group, principally based in Dahir, stronghold in southern Beirut and also in southern Lebanon. It started firing in what it says was solidarity with Hamas on October the 8th. That's the day after the October the 7th terrorist massacre. And it started firing at Israeli communities in Israel's north. Now, to put that into perspective, to try and understand that, had that happened before October the 7th, even a day of rocket fire, that would have probably triggered a war. Lots of people here wonder why it has actually taken so long to erupt into a level of conflict that we see now. Israeli forces, of course, have invaded the country. We're now seeing airstrikes the length and breadth of Lebanon. But the hope, of course, is that this will take the sting out of it. And remember, before the announcement of Yahya Sinwar, his possible death, diplomacy in Gaza was pretty much, it was non-existent. People had given up. The Americans had given up. The Gulf states had given up as well. That possibility now of a diplomatic pathway must, many people think here, be on the agenda again. That said, it may very well be that the Israelis want to still force their momentum. They're not going to want to go back to the status quo of October the 7th, when you had this heavily armed militant group on the doorstep with the ability to penetrate Israel or fire rockets. They want to make sure that that doesn't happen. And as a result of that, you may see actually them pushing further into Lebanon in the next few days and weeks. You may see more airstrikes in the coming days and weeks too. Again, we have to wait and see. But ultimately, to defuse this situation, you're going to have to take the Gaza crisis and have a ceasefire there. But I think you're looking at a grand bargain across the region, which ultimately is going to bring in the Islamic Republic of Iran as well, with strong actors, probably the United States, saying to them that the days of you arming militias with the intent to harm Israel, that's over, that's gone. You've been degraded. Hezbollah has been degraded. Remember, Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of the group, has been assassinated in a massive airstrike here in Beirut. You've also had the episode with the pagers and the walkie-talkies, just showing how penetrated Hezbollah is by Israeli intelligence. On one level, there will be no going back to the status quo. You are going to have to accept that you now have a weaker hand in all of that. But of course, we don't know, as Alistair was saying there, the death of Yahya Sinwar, if it is confirmed, doesn't automatically mean that any of these multi-conflicts that are going on around the region are going to stop. It's not necessary that they will stop.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Alex, for now in Beirut, thank you for that. Now, it is thought that Sinwar had been living with his family in the tunnel network beneath Gaza when Hamas launched the attack of the 7th of October. The Israeli military in February released this footage claiming to show Sinwar moving through a tunnel. Well, the IDF released further footage claiming to have found millions of dollars in cash in a safe that belonged to Sinwar. Well, on this week's The World podcast with our presenter Yalda Hakim, she discussed with her co-host Richard Engel why Israel had been unable to reach Sinwar up until now.
Israeli security and defense establishment will say to me when I say, why haven't you got Yahya Sinwar's head on a plate right now? They will say, we know where he is, we know what he's doing, we know he's in these tunnels, but he's surrounded himself with our hostages. So we're not about to kill 10, 15 Israeli hostages to get Yahya Sinwar. Now, Hassan Nasrallah did live in hiding. He gave his sermons in hiding. He lived underground for decades because of concern around Israeli assassination, but not to the same extent as Yahya Sinwar. And perhaps he thought on some level this was a red line that the Israelis wouldn't cross.
Well, within the last hour, the Israeli Defense Minister, Yav Gallant, has put out a cryptic message onto social media. Let me show it to you. He said, you will pursue your enemies and they will fall before your sword. That is a quote from Leviticus 26. He said, our enemies cannot hide, and we will pursue and eliminate them. All right, let's bring back in, our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle. And Ali, why don't you just give us your reading of that tweet from Yav Gallant? It's probably worth telling our viewers who is in the picture that Gallant tweeted as well. 3 crosses there. You've got Mohammed Daif, who is a former leader of Hamas, killed. Then you've got Hassan Nasrallah, killed recently, leader of Hezbollah, and then a central cross with a picture not yet behind it.
Yeah, Mohammed Daif was head of Qassam Brigades, which was the military wing of Hamas. So he also would have been absolutely integral to Hamas's planning for the October the 7th attacks. His body, to the best of our knowledge, has never been found, but his death has been confirmed by the Israeli military a couple of months ago in an airstrike. He was a very key. He was pretty much sort of number 2 in Hamas, if you like, within Gaza. He was a very shadowy figure, very rarely ever photographed. The name Daif means guest in Arabic because he used to stay in different places on different nights, so to evade Israeli detection. And that black square in the middle of the tweet from Yav Gallant, presumably reserved for the face of Yahya Sinwar. Now, I mean, Gallant's the defense minister of Israel. He will know more than we do, but I think the same as us, he is probably waiting on official confirmation from the forensic tests that are being done by people within Israel, because I'm hearing from people very senior in the Israeli government and the Israeli military, what they're telling me is that they're pretty sure that this is Sinwar. What they're waiting for is that scientific confirmation. It shouldn't be too difficult. Sinwar spent about 20 years in an Israeli prison. They have his fingerprints, they have his DNA, and so it shouldn't be too challenging for them to be able to match that and establish beyond doubt that it is Sinwar that they have killed. So I would expect a confirmation, pretty shortly, within hours, certainly. And I would guess that the announcement would be made by Benjamin Netanyahu. I think Israel's prime minister would look to try and make this announcement himself. But the fact that the Israeli military and the Israeli security establishment have put out this statement saying they're looking into the reports, they would not have put that statement out if they weren't pretty sure themselves that they had got a man who they'd tried to get many times before and who had, until it looks, and yesterday, evaded Israeli capture or Israeli assassination.
Ali, for now in Jerusalem, thank you so much for that. Now, earlier, I spoke to Professor... I'm told that we now have Professor Syed Mohammed Marandi from the University of Tehran. Professor Marandi, thanks so much for making the time to speak with us today. Still waiting for confirmation. As you will have seen, the reports suggest the Israelis are looking at whether or not they have killed Yahya Sinwar. What is your reaction to that news if it proves proven to be true?
It really won't make any difference at all. The resistance will continue. The Palestinian people have made a decision. They will no longer be accepting a status of inferior human beings in the land of Palestine. They won't accept ethno-supremacism. They've risen up, and the people of the region are rising up. I was in Beirut when Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah was martyred by the Israelis. I was 1,000 meters away from there. After 2 or 3 days, we saw nothing happen. The people in Lebanon became more resilient. They became more firm in their commitment to defeat what we see as a genocidal regime. We just saw a couple of days ago children burning alive in a tent amidst the indifference of the West, which continues to fund this genocidal army. So Yahya Sinwar may be a martyr for the cause, but the cause will continue. We saw that in South Africa during apartheid. We saw that across the global South during the years and decades and centuries of liberation.
So, Professor Marandi, what does that struggle look like then, going forward, knowing what we know as to the situation currently in Gaza?
In the West, it is claimed that people have to have equal rights, and that people of all races and ethnicities and religions are equal before the law. The Palestinian people have been subjugated for well over 75 years. They are treated as subhuman. Genocide is carried out against them. They are going to resist. They've chosen the path of resistance because they know that this will never stop. The subjugation of the Palestinian people, the ethnic cleansing, the terror will never stop. It's not just happening in Gaza, it's happening in the West Bank. Every day the Israelis are murdering Palestinians in the occupied West Bank, which even according to your government is illegally occupied. But it's okay if the Israelis do that because it is accepted in the West that they have special rights and special privileges. If what is going on now today in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Syria, and in the West Bank, with all these atrocities being committed by the Israeli regime, if this was carried out anywhere else in the world, there would be uproar. It would have ended a year ago. But not only has it not ended, Western governments are empowering the Israeli regime to slaughter day after day after day. The video of the burning of the children 2-3 days ago will live forever in the minds of people across the world. And they will remember this not as an Israeli crime, but as a crime committed by the entire West. All of the Western governments were behind this. So what else do you expect of the Palestinian people but to resist? What else do you expect of the Lebanese people but resistance? They are considered as Amalek. They have been described as Amalek time after time after time. The Israeli regime can cut off water, food, medicine, and the West will say nothing. They can pound buildings with...
Okay. Professor Marandi, we've heard a lot from you at that point. Now, look, as you'll know, the question of genocide is rejected by the Israeli government, and as you well know that, and it is before the international court. And you will have also seen, I'm sure, yesterday, the challenge to the Israelis at the United Nations from the United States and from the UK, demanding that more aid be allowed in and there is an end to the fighting, a ceasefire, and the release of hostages. What more do you want to see the West doing to try and bring about an end to the violence in the region?
People see genocide. They know what is genocide. We've been watching it for well over a year. This Holocaust is not something that we can hide through narrative building. This is ongoing, and it will continue after our discussion, and it will continue tomorrow and the day after and the day after. The West is complicit. The West has to stop the genocide. They could stop it tomorrow. One phone call from Biden would stop the genocide. The United States is complicit. They're arming the Israelis. They're helping the Israelis.
So, Mr. Rand, do you think that if weapons were stopped being given to the Israelis, that would stop the actions as you see them?
Do you have any doubt about that? Do you think that the West did not know that they were starving people in northern Gaza? They've stopped the food for almost 2 weeks now. They've stopped everything. And you think the West didn't know that? And then they just now, after the world becomes outraged, they give the Israeli regime a month, in addition to 2 weeks, a month. What do they want to do? Starve them first? The hypocrisy of the West will not be forgotten. If people in the West wonder why BRICS is on the rise, why the global South or the global majority is turning away from the West, they should look at the images on their screens. They should look at the people burning alive in front of cameras, and then they'll understand what's happening. The West has destroyed its soft power. It's destroyed its image and credibility. What is happening today in Gaza will not be forgotten until my children have grown very old. But since the West does not plan to change, I don't even think it will be, that image will be restored even then.
Professor Morandi, what's going to be the response, do you think, of Iran if this is proven to be correct and Sinwar has been killed?
There are tens of thousands of Sinwars in Gaza and tens of thousands of Sinwars in the West Bank. When Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah was assassinated, I came on television and said, nothing will happen. He will only grow more popular, Hezbollah will become more popular, and the resistance will grow stronger. Look at what's happened on the border between Palestine and Lebanon over the past 2 weeks. The Israeli regime has tried to enter, and they've been hammered day after day after day. They will not win. They will not beat the Palestinian people. The apartheid regime in South Africa thought they could subjugate the people of South Africa eternally. It didn't work. This is not going to work either. But the only difference is that this time the West has invested everything in this Holocaust.
Professor Morandi, as you know, and as was said again at the UN by the US representative and the UK representative, they want to see a two-state solution at the end of all of this. Is that something that, in your mind, is a possibility sometime near in the future?
The whole notion of a two-state solution was always a lie. They never planned to give the Palestinian people a state. They were buying time for the Israeli regime to colonize the West Bank. The land grab goes on as we speak. As we speak right now, they are taking more and more land of the Palestinian in the West Bank, and Western embassies will do nothing about it. Western governments will do nothing about it. Western media will not report it.
Professor, so you think that all of those words said by the UN, all of those words said by politicians in this country, in Europe and in the United States, it's all just lies. They don't actually want to see a two-state solution, and the state of Israel and the Palestinian state living side by side in peace. You don't think any of that is true for those people who say that continually? As you know, it's a continual argument that is made by those that want to see an end to the violence in the region.
You can divide them into two groups. One are those who are naive, who want to believe that one day the Israelis are going to see the light and give the Palestinian people a state. And then there are those who are cynical, and they're the ones who are with the real power, who never have had any intention to force the Israeli regime to give them a two-state, to create a two-state solution. But more importantly is the fact that there should only be one state where all human people, or human beings are equal. Is that something so impossible to imagine in the West? So it's like saying in apartheid South Africa, you can have 1/3 of the South Africa for the white supremacists and give 2/3 or 1/3 to the majority. Would anyone accept that as a moral solution? The argument that we put forward, and the resistance and the axis of resistance puts forward, is that all people in Palestine are equal human beings and they have to have equal rights, Jews, Christians, and Muslims. But in the West, that is outrageous.
Professor Moran, so that's all people living in one state under one government. Is that your suggestion?
Yes, the people of that land deserve to stay on their land. You have millions of people living as refugees in Lebanon, and even now they're being pounded by the Israeli regime. Palestinians, you have millions in Jordan, you have millions in Syria, and the Israelis are bombing Syria regularly too.
Millions of Jewish people living in Israel.
So what is the problem with having people living with equal rights in the land? Why should we accept a law or a state where one ethnicity is supreme and other ethnicities are subordinate? The West pretends that it is against this, but this is exactly what the West is trying to preserve. This is what the West wants to happen and to continue to happen, to exist in our part of the world. A supremacist regime where one group of people have rights and the other group of people are Amalek. They are subhuman. They have no soul. They are unworthy. And that is why they can burn people alive like this.
Okay. Professor Morandi, does the Iranian state still want the destruction of Israel?
The Iranian state wants an end to the apartheid regime, the dismantling of the racist, ethno-supremacist regime. If you want to call it the destruction of Israel or the dismantling of Israel, that's fine. It's the same as South Africa. If you call it the destruction of apartheid South Africa or the dismantling of apartheid South Africa, what the Islamic Republic of Iran will continue to support across the board is one state where all people have equal rights in the land and all the Palestinian people have a right to return to their homes that have been stolen from them.
Well, the South Africa example is one country that had apartheid and then another country that was completely different, South Africa that was born out of 1994. So you're saying that Iran wants the destruction of Israel and then a new Israeli state afterwards?
Apartheid South Africa was a regime where white supremacists ruled over the rest of the society, which was the majority. And Desmond Tutu said when he visited Palestine that the situation in Palestine was much worse than apartheid South Africa. So if apartheid South Africa must be dismantled, apartheid in Palestine definitely must be dismantled. One state where all people are equal, not a state where they can burn children alive and nothing happens.
Professor Morandi, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, you're watching Sky News today. Of course, plenty more to come throughout the rest of the hour as we continue our coverage of this developing story as the Israelis investigate whether or not the leader of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, has been killed.
day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
They want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Welcome back. Let's just bring you an update to our news of earlier today that the One Direction star Liam Payne has died in Buenos Aires in Argentina. He fell from a hotel balcony in the city. Now, the Argentinian prosecutor's office have released details now. They've done an autopsy saying that Liam Payne died from multiple traumas, internal and external bleeding. They're saying that his death is being investigated, though everything does indicate that he was alone at the time of the fall. They also suggest that he could have been semi-conscious or completely unconscious when falling. Now, it says the autopsy is reporting that he had significant head injuries, and the injuries suggest that there was no involvement of a third party. Now, there was an emergency call made by the hotel that Liam Payne was staying in. He was in Buenos Aires at the concert of his former bandmate now, Julian, earlier this month. The hotel, as we understand from that emergency call, was concerned about their guest, Liam Payne, and the prosecutor's office now say that a search of his room has revealed what appeared to be narcotics, alcohol, and destroyed objects and furniture. It was reported earlier that the room was in complete disarray. The autopsy showing that he died from multiple traumas, internal and external bleeding, having fallen from that hotel balcony in Buenos Aires. And the investigation at this stage, although it is ongoing, suggests that everything indicates he was on his own at the time of that fall. Liam Payne, 31, former band member of One Direction, who died earlier today in Buenos Aires. Right, let's take you back to the Middle East now and the developing story there. The Israeli military is checking on reports that it has killed the leader of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, in Gaza. In a statement that was posted on social media, the IDF said, during IDF operations, 3 terrorists were eliminated. The IDF and ISA are checking on the possibility that one of the terrorists was Yahya Sinwar. At this stage, the identity of the terrorists cannot be confirmed. In the building where the terrorists were eliminated, there were no signs of the presence of hostages. The forces operating in the area are continuing to operate with required caution. Well, earlier today, an Israeli airstrike on a school in Jabalia in the north of Gaza killed at least 15 people. That's according to the Hamas-run health ministry. The Israeli military said the strike targeted dozens of militants they had claimed gathered at the school. They released the names of 12 people who they say were there. It's not yet known whether this attack on Jabalia is the same attack that may have killed Sinwar. So who is the leader of Hamas? Yahya Sinwar is 61 and has been the leader of Hamas since 2017. He joined the group in the early 1980s. He spent more than 20 years in prison for killing both Israelis and Palestinians suspected of collaborating with Israel. He was released in 2011 as part of a swap deal with more than 1,000 Palestinian prisoners from one Israeli soldier, Gilad Shalit, who had been held by Hamas for more than 5 years. Sinwar survived an assassination attempt in 2021 after an Israeli airstrike was reported to have hit his home. He is the architect of the 7th of October attacks that killed around 1,200 people. He was also top of Israel's most wanted list. Following the Israeli assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, another leader of Hamas, Sinwar replaced him as head of the political bureau, taking control of the entire group. All right, let's speak now to Yusuf El-Halou, a British Palestinian activist. Yusuf, thanks so much for joining us. First of all, let me just get your reaction to this news, this developing story for the past couple of hours, that the Israelis are investigating whether or not Sinwar is dead.
Yes, Kemal, thank you. I'm a political analyst, not an activist. Well, if this news is confirmed by Hamas, then it's going to be a big shock and loss for the resistance movement Hamas and for a great percentage of the population in Gaza. We're also waiting to hear confirmation, final words from the Israeli military. Now, of course, this development might push Israel, headed by Netanyahu, to start negotiations for prisoner swap deal. And this is considered a big day. If it's confirmed, it will be euphoria, another victory for Netanyahu, who has been under a huge pressure from the international community to stop this genocidal war. Since the 7th of October, Gaza has been subjected to unallowed aggression, genocidal war under the pretext of self-defense, and much of Gaza has been destroyed. Now, of course, some people blame Hamas for what happened. Others, they say Hamas is the result and product of Israel. If Israel ends its occupation, then the resistance will lay their arms.
And is that your sense of it? And my apologies, you're an analyst, not an activist. Is that your sense of it as well, that that could happen and there would be an end to the violence if the occupation was brought to an end?
I think this is another chance for the Israeli society and for the international community to pressure Israel to end its military occupation, because you will have more wars. Israel has actually orphaned tens of thousands of Palestinian children, and those children, when they grow up, they will become resistance and freedom fighters. So again, we are going to be back to square zero. Israel will not feel safe. The Middle East will not have stability as long as Israel occupies Palestinian lands, and as long as there is international hypocrisy, international silence. I mean, the international people, the international community have been watching this digital genocide being broadcasted by the victims for over a year now. And children are being killed, burned alive, families wiped out. Much of Gaza has been destroyed. People of Gaza, they say the international community has failed them. And they say that Israel is actually using their blood for political gain. If you look at the Israeli media, they don't show their society what's going on in Gaza. All what Netanyahu has been doing is lobbying the right, the left, the center, the opposition, the international, the Jewish people worldwide behind him to say, look, we are fighting a terrorist organization. But what has been going on Gaza is a collective punishment. It's a brutal revenge. And by killing Sinwar, this is not going to end the resistance, because the resistance is an idea. And Palestinians say that they have nothing to lose. And I don't think that by killing Sinwar as well, that Israel will tell the world, like, look, we have achieved something. Israel will keep shedding crocodile tears. It will claim that it faces threats from Gaza, from southern Lebanon, and from Iran. But at the end of the day, the root cause of this conflict is the occupation. Sinwar was enjoying popularity because he spent some years in Israeli jails. And he was behind the mastermind who organized and orchestrated the 7th of October operation. Now, that attack was a surprise for all of us. Hamas did not consult the Palestinian people when they carried out their attack, but Israel exploited what happened in order to unleash its brutal revenge and to ethnically cleanse the population, especially from northern Gaza. And Gaza is the world's largest open-air prison, and it has been transformed into the world's largest concentration camp. And this concentration camp has been transformed into an extermination camp. Let me remind you and remind the viewers that Palestinians, they have over 12,000 Palestinian political prisoners held in Israeli jails, including tens of Palestinian minors and women without a charge or trial. So what Hamas wanted to do on that day is to bring the world's attention and to the grievances of the Palestinian people.
And Yusuf, and this is the thing, and look, you said it's crocodile tears. The pain and suffering that has been meted out to everyone in this region is something far more than anything cynical as that, wouldn't you say? And that is that really leaves the question then, doesn't it? Is if Sinwar has been killed, what does come next? Does the fighting continue, or is there another way forward?
Well, the ball is in the Israeli court. Now it's up to Netanyahu to say, look, we have achieved another illusional victory by killing Sinwar. And I think the Israeli society, the families of the Palestinian hostages, now they will impose more pressure on Netanyahu to push him to sign or to reach a prisoner swap deal. I think there's no justification for this genocidal war to go on. There are no targets to attack. I mean, Israel has killed so many people, over 45,000, tens of thousands of civilians, and over 100,000 Palestinians who have been injured. Much of Gaza has been destroyed. So I think it's useless. It's meaningless. I mean, now it's time to reach a settlement to this conflict, to release all the hostages. And of course, we are against the killing of civilians from both sides. But at the end of the day, Israel does not consider Palestinians as humans. Israel has been dealing with Palestinians as subhumans. Israel has been demonizing the Palestinian people, justifying its attacks by the fabrications that came out from the 7th of October about the hidden babies and the Arab story and so on. So I think now there's a chance that this genocide comes to an end. People in Gaza, of course, they are following this story, and they say that they hope that Netanyahu has had enough blood. So it's time now to end this war and to save the lives of 2.3 million people who have been languishing in the prison of Gaza.
And Yusuf, it's that dehumanization, isn't it? This lack of seeing either side as being human, which is really at the root cause of all of this. And it strikes me as very difficult to believe that more killing can bring about a peaceful settlement to this moment. Does there need to be more input from those willing in the region to say that we can bring about a peaceful solution in Gaza? If it is your contention, as you said, that the Israelis don't want to bring this about, can more pressure be put on them and on leaders in Gaza and in the West Bank to try and bring a peaceful solution?
Now, look, everybody knows, including yourself, that Israel enjoys impunity. Israeli officials, politicians, they have never been held accountable for the multiple war crimes that they have been committing ever since 1948. And let me remind you again, and the viewers, that history did not start on the 7th of October. I think it's up to the American administration, who is going to come next as a president, to really show the world that the US, that has been exporting civilizations, democracy, and slogans of human rights, that it is serious about ending the suffering of millions of Palestinians who have been living under colonialist, brutal military occupation across the occupied Palestinian territories. The two-state solution has been dead. Israel has killed any chance for the two-state solution. They have been making things miserable in order to drive the remaining millions of Palestinians out of the land. They say the land is too small, and they are not willing to share it. They don't trust Palestinians. So that's why there is a notion now, there is a support for the one democratic, secular state for all of its citizens, regardless of race, religion, ethnicity, color, to live side by side next to each other with harmony, coexistence, with equal rights. The most important point is equal rights, because Israel does not, as I say, does not deal with Palestinians as human beings. So the US administration, the European Union, the UK, they must exercise serious pressure, take practical steps on the ground to say, stop, enough is enough, enough bloodshed. Palestinians deserve to have a state of their own. They have been struggling for self-determination for decades. So now the test now lies on the shoulders of the international community, who have been allowing Israel for over a year to carry out this genocide under the pretext of self-defense.
Yusuf Al-Halul, political analyst, appreciate your expertise. Thank you for being with us, Yusuf. I want to bring you some breaking news. There has been some international reaction. Our partners at NBC News say that US officials have said that the Israelis have informed them the mission that it seems to have killed Sinwar happened yesterday. They said that in addition to DNA testing, the IDF is also doing facial recognition tests to verify his identity. The US according to this release, was not involved in the operation, did not provide specific intelligence that brought the IDF to Sinwar. That's according to 3 US officials. In fact, they say, senior Pentagon officials found out about his possible death after the mission. And the US believe, if confirmed, that the killing of Sinwar was a lucky break. Now, 2 US officials have told NBC that the operation that could have killed Sinwar took place in Rafah. That's information received from the Israelis. Of course, that is in the south of Gaza. The IDF has done extensive site exploitation, and some of that is ongoing. The officials have said that they could not identify anything that yielded. All right, so look, the US saying that they were not involved in the operation, that they have been told that this happened yesterday and that there is DNA testing ongoing. Let's bring in our international correspondent, Alex Rossi, for some reaction to what we've heard. So look, NBC being told by US officials some details here. Interesting in this, Alex, I think that this happened, according to those officials, in Rafah.
Yeah, so that's in the southern part of the enclave. I think the other bit that's really interesting there is that they say that they think the Israelis essentially got a lucky break. And of course, we can speculate, we can analyse with the limited amount of information that we've got. But if you look at that photograph of the dead body of Yahya Sinwar, it perhaps actually does reveal some information. I mean, why was the leader of Hamas moving around openly above ground? Is that a suggestion that Hamas has been significantly degraded by the pounding that the Israelis have delivered to the Gaza Strip, that actually he was having to move from place to place? He had a limited amount of protection around him. I mean, effectively, he was a kind of fugitive moving from place to place within the Gaza Strip. That, of course, is speculation, but you would think if Hamas was still a force to be reckoned with, he would be heavily protected underground and surrounded by his people. That doesn't appear to have been the case at all. So that perhaps is significant and shows how much Hamas has been degraded, and perhaps is also an indication that the end of this crisis is closer than many people had thought. It may very well be that with Yahya Sinwar dead, the mastermind behind October the 7th, if it transpires after the tests that Israel has carried out prove that actually Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu comes under an extraordinary amount of pressure now from allies in the United States to wrap things up and wrap things up quickly. The big junction, of course, Kamali, for all of this is the election on November the 5th. It could have a very different complexion. Who, of course, gets in and ascends to the White House next. But certainly here in Lebanon and across the rest of the region, people really are hoping that this may be the kind of beginning of the end of this crisis, and we are moving towards a diplomatic solution to calm the region and stop the fighting.
Absolutely. All right, Alex, for now in Beirut, thank you for that. Well, we're going to continue our coverage here on Sky News of that news that the Israelis are checking whether or not they have killed the leader of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar. US officials have been told that DNA tests are being carried out on Sinwar, or the person suspected to be him, after an assault yesterday. The assault took place in Rafah. We'll get more detail in the next hour of the programme. Here's Jonathan Samuels.
The
most significant day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
You want to jump in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
It's 5 o'clock. I'm Jonathan Samuels. This is the News Hour, 60 minutes of news, analysis and interviews. The top stories. Israel says it's checking reports it has killed its most wanted man, the leader of Hamas, in a military operation in Gaza. Yahya Sinwar had been accused by Israel of orchestrating the 7th of October attacks.
I know that in the morning now, see us in the light upon the hill.
The family of One Direction star Liam Payne say they're heartbroken by his death at the age of 31. An investigation is underway after the singer fell from a balcony at a hotel in Argentina. Authorities say they found alcohol and drugs in his room. Plus, a woman who stirred up racial hatred online during the summer riots is jailed. Hello, a very good evening. Israel says it's checking whether it has killed the leader of Hamas in a military operation in Gaza. This image appears to show Israeli soldiers at the scene of the attack with the body of a man believed to be Yahya Sinwar in the rubble. It's reported tonight that the Israeli cabinet has been told that Sinwar is very likely dead. Well, 61-year-old Sinwar has led Hamas in Gaza since 2017 after joining its ranks in the early 1980s. He spent more than 20 years in prison for killing Israelis and Palestinians suspected of collaborating with Israel. He was released in 2011 as part of a swap of more than 1,000 Palestinian prisoners for the Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit, who had been held hostage by Hamas for more than 5 years. Sinwar survived an assassination attempt in 2021 when an Israeli airstrike was reported to have hit his home. Israel believes he was one of the architects of the 7th of October attacks, which killed 1,200 people. Since then, Sinwar had been at the top of Israel's most wanted list. Well, the Israel Defense Forces released a statement. During operations in Gaza, 3 terrorists were eliminated. The IDF and ISA, the Israel Security Agency, are checking the possibility that one of the terrorists was Yahya Sinwar. At this stage, the identity of the terrorists cannot be confirmed. Well, let's head to Jerusalem, join our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle. It's been rather sketchy, the detail surrounding this operation. What more can you tell us tonight?
Well, we're still waiting confirmation from Israeli authorities. Not clear whether that will come out through the official government channels, the Prime Minister's office, or perhaps via the IDF itself. All I'm being told is that there should be some further news quite soon. The tests are being done on the body of the man believed to be Yahya Sinwar, forensic test to establish beyond any doubt that it is him, but certainly the photographs circulating online that show his body in closer detail than the one you showed there bear an exact resemblance of him. And the steer that I'm getting from senior military and political officials is that they believe that they have got their most wanted man. So we'll wait for that confirmation to come out, at some point in the not too distant future. I think it is a major scalp for the Israelis. It is a significant moment in this war. I think the consequences will be significant, but exactly what the consequences will be is unclear.
Alistair, in Jerusalem, thank you for the moment. So, if confirmed, let's look more closely at how significant the death of Yahya Sinwar would be. Nomi Bar Yaakov is a Middle East and diplomacy analyst at the Chatham House think tank and joins us now. Good to see you. Your initial reaction then to the death of Sinwar. We're waiting, of course, for it to be formally announced.
Thank you, Jonathan, for having me on the show. I think, if confirmed that he is indeed no longer with us, it would be the equivalent of the United States assassinating Osama bin Laden after 9/11. I think that, for Israel, the 7th of October last year was equivalent to 9/11, and I think Israel also repeated many of the mistakes that the US did in the aftermath, but certainly killing Sinwar would close the circle. Israel had set as its goals to eliminate the leadership of Hamas in Gaza and to take out its military capability. So they've taken out 23 out of 24 battalions, maybe close to 24 battalions. Hamas has very little arsenal left, and they have assassinated Yahya Sinwar's deputy, Mohammed Deif. And if he is indeed killed, then they should be able to reach a ceasefire, release all the hostages, and Gazans should be able to start rebuilding their lives.
Well, that is the big question, isn't it? What direction does it take the conflict in next? But from what you're saying, you believe that it could kickstart those negotiations and potentially see the release of hostages.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think now is the time, if he is indeed confirmed dead, now is the time for the United States to put the pressure on Israel and exercise the leverage that they have and have not used thus far, and say, okay, you've achieved all your declared goals. Now it's take it or leave it. And if the leave it should have absolutely dire consequences and dire costs. I think, there is no reason why the war in Gaza shouldn't end.
Sinwar spent much of his time underground. We know that, reportedly with hostages around him as human shields. This strike will have been the result of impressive Israeli intelligence, although we're also hearing reports from our colleagues at NBC that some are saying that actually it was a lucky break that caught him.
Yes, that's also what they're saying in Israel. They're saying that it was a lucky break in Israel, that they stumbled, is the term that they're using, that they stumbled across him over ground. So whether it was intelligence or whether they happened to stumble across him, he's very clever, Yahya Sinwar, and he has not been traced. It was very hard to track him. To track him for a number of weeks now. So there were some rumors that he may have been dead only because neither the US intelligence nor the Israeli intelligence were able to track him. So it's the likelihood, I think, is that they stumbled across him.
Nomi, as you're speaking to us, we are getting a couple of breaking lines from the Reuters news agency. Hamas sources say indications suggest that Sinwar has been killed in an Israeli operation in Gaza. That's Hamas sources speaking to the Reuters news agency. Israeli police say on completion of various processes, we will confirm whether it was an assassination. They say they are looking at dental images which have been submitted to the police forensics lab. DNA testing also currently in progress. It does seem the direction of travel is very much moving towards a confirmation that he has been killed. How will the news be received in Gaza? He has been the man leading what they believe is the resistance against Israel.
Well, yes and no. I think, Hamas overtook the Strip in a very bloody coup against Fatah in 2007. They won the elections in 2006. And both Fatah and the US and Europe actually refused to recognize Fatah as the legitimate leadership. And that's where the split came from. But don't forget that there are plenty of Fatah supporters in Gaza, and they have been hiding underground. Those who dared speak against him or against Hamas in general were tortured really, really badly and thrown back with broken arms as sort of put on display, and the warning was, don't you dare say anything against us. So it's, I think that there is plenty of opposition to Hamas in Gaza. They had only built tunnels for themselves. They didn't build one bomb shelter for any civilians, and they also used the civilians as human shields. So I don't think that Hamas is gaining popularity in Gaza. I think there's very much, we're going to see a change in mood, and I think we're going to see a lot of hope if indeed a ceasefire will be agreed, and the hostages will be released, and many Palestinian prisoners will be released, and hopefully we will see an Arab and Western presence to support a new Palestinian leadership in Gaza.
Well, you're painting a positive picture. We shall wait and see. And just a quick word from you about who may take over. His brother it would seem the most likely. Is that your analysis?
I would be very surprised if his brother stays alive.
OK, we shall leave it there. We appreciate your time this evening with this breaking news. Much appreciated. Nomi Bar Yaakov, international negotiator and Middle East and diplomacy analyst at Chatham House. Plenty more on that. A breaking story, of course, throughout the evening. The family of One Direction star Liam Payne say they're heartbroken after he fell to his death from a hotel balcony in Argentina. They say he will forever live in their hearts and they'll remember him for his kind, funny and brave soul. An investigation is underway into the circumstances surrounding his death. Tonight, the authorities have said a series of substances were seized from his hotel room, which indicated alcohol and drug consumption. Our US correspondent, Martha Kellner, reports.
Forensic teams search for clues. Liam Payne had left many. He plummeted to his death from this third-floor balcony. His behaviour had earlier been concerning hotel staff. Listen to their 911 emergency call.
Hola, buenos días. Recién llamé que se me acordó. Llamo del Hotel Casa Sur Palermo, Costa Rica 6032.
¿Qué sucede en el lugar, señor?
Bueno, tenemos un huésped que está sobrepasado de droga y alcohol y, bueno, está Cuando está consciente, está rompiendo toda la habitación y bueno, necesitamos que manden a alguien, por favor.
Bajo efectos de alcohol y estupefaciente, ¿no, señor?
Sí, correcto.
They agree police need to attend. Fans lit candles on the street outside. The grief thousands of miles away in the UK was even more acute. The star's family releasing this statement. Liam will live forever in our hearts, they said. We'll remember him for his kind, funny and brave soul. We are supporting each other the best we can as a family and ask for privacy and space at this awful time. Payne had been in Argentina for a One Direction bandmates concert. He'd spent time with his girlfriend and started his final day like this.
Morning, everybody. Here's a little video of me. It's rude to put hats on a table.
Sorry.
Is this your hat?
Yeah.
Children. It's a lovely day here in Argentina. This is the breakfast table.
I'm just eating an orange.
Just enjoying coffee and breakfast, even though it's like 1 p.m. We're enjoying ourselves here at our lovely friend Gon's house. Shout out Gon, wherever Gon is.
Shout out Gon.
Shout out Gon, big bad Gon. Yeah, so it's going to be a nice day.
That promise turned to this. At night, Liam Payne's body taken to a mortuary, an autopsy set to confirm the cause of death. Fans grieved to the lyrics of One Direction.
We can live forever.
We can live forever, they sang, but this is where it ended for their idol.
We could be the greatest thing that the world has ever seen.
A pop star adored across the globe. Martha Kellner, Sky News, Buenos Aires.
Well, Sky's Ashna Hurinag joins us now. Ashna, just 31 years old, desperately sad. And as Martha was saying there, reaction has been coming in from around the world.
It's been quite an overwhelming day, I think, for people right across the world, and we're starting to get a few more details about what exactly unfolded inside that hotel room in Argentina. We know that police were called to responding to calls about a man who were behaving erratically. But today in Argentina, we know prosecutors have already conducted the autopsy into Liam Payne's death, and what they have found has been quite alarming to hear. They have said that they have seized a series of substances from his room, indicating that alcohol and drug consumption was ongoing. They say among the drugs they found included benzodiazepam, that's something that's used to control epilepsy and also control panic disorders. They said they found the room in a state of disorder. They found destroyed objects, furniture, and forensics suggest that Liam Payne fell from a significant height, which led to his significant head injuries. He said he could have fallen while semi-conscious or unconscious. That detail is yet to be established. They are investigating his death in an ongoing fashion. They say although they are not looking for anyone else, they are looking into the possibility of the involvement of third parties in the events prior to his death. We know that this is a man who has talked very openly about his struggles and about the work that he's done on his own mental health. Here is my report on the life and legacy of Liam Payne.
From a working-class family in Wolverhampton to superstardom on a global scale. And it all began here, at just 14 years old, auditioning on The X Factor.
Fly me to the moon, let me play among the stars.
Millions watched as the son of a factory worker and a nurse then came back 2 years later. And became 1/5 of the biggest and most beloved boy band of the era.
You're insecure, don't know what for.
One Direction